Hey, everybody. Welcome in to another episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I am your host, Jeff Kaiser. And for today's episode, have a guest on who has been a long time coming. I say that with a lot of guests because usually we'll schedule things way in the future. We've been talking about this for quite a while. He's here today on the podcast, Dan Bonebrake. You may know him for bands such as Vacant Andys, Dashboard Confessional, The Enablers, so on and so on and so on. We'll get through a lot of those bands today. Dan, how are you, my friend? What's going on?
Well, man, thanks for having me on here. Things things are good, man. But yeah, if you had to list out all of those, that would have taken the first hour of this podcast.
What's the number, just on top of your head? How many bands have you been in if you had to kind of call out a number right now?
I've probably played in or filled in for 30 bands plus. Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot. I don't know if you beat Chuck Loose though. He may have you beat.
Yeah, I would bet Chuck Loose has me beat. And funny enough, Chuck Loose and I haven't done a show together in the same band. We've done shows
Wow.
together, but just not in the same band.
Wow.
He's definitely I would say he's got me beat in those. His list is long. I mean, I'm pretty proud of my list too, though. I'm not gonna, I'm not knocking.
Right. We'll talk about a lot of those bands that you've been in, both past, present, and perhaps what's coming up in the future that you are aware of. So what have you been up to right now? Like what's your latest project? What are you working on?
Right now, I've been working on getting the release for the band that I'm in with Keith Machad, Andre Serafini from Quit and Fay Wray, and Chris Caraba. The band's called Lightworkers. So we recorded that during the pandemic, and we're getting we signed with digital label services and so we have our own record company called Worker Records that we're releasing it. So that's getting released at the end in May. So we're finally excited that we have a date for that. So I'm doing the Lightworkers. We got a couple shows coming up in May, one for a benefit and then one up at Lucy's in Gainesville. And then I'm also so I've been rehearsing for that, and I've been rehearsing we got an Enabler show coming up next month. Oh no, at the end of this month. Sorry, now it's April. So April 29th in Gainesville. So those are the two things that I'm doing actively right now, and it's keeping me busy and pretty excited about it.
What's it like working with some of the other guys maybe you had worked with in the past? Because you actually worked with Quit long time ago, briefly, right?
Yeah. I was in Quit for a while. I was in Fay Wray first, and the second incarnation of Fay Wray, like the second record, Andre Serafini from Quit was playing drums. And so I got into that, and then we were doing some shows together, and they didn't really have a permanent bass player. So I ended up being in that also, which I really wanted to be in. I mean, Quit was one of those bands, so late, I guess my late high school years throughout the Army and stuff like that. And, early 90s. I mean, we just loved Quit. Me and my friends, we loved Quit. So being able to get in, play with those guys was awesome. But Andre and I have now, I think we're up to like 7 bands that we play in, that we've played in or, recorded and stuff like that with. So he's one of just the nicest people in the world. And he's a fabulous drummer. He can sing, he's just a delight to be around. So I really enjoy that.
That's awesome, man. And back in the day when Quit was at the height of their time in the local scene, did you get a chance to see them often play?
Yeah. Well, I got to go see them, and the Vacant Andys used to play with them, down in Cheers, over at I guess it was probably called The Edge or Chili Pepper at the time, where Revolution is. And we played some shows with them, and I mean, we even played one of their final shows at Cheers, because Quit called it quits here and there every once in a while. So I think we even have, I know I have a cassette like recording of it. Like we had Addison come out and play a Descendant song with us, sing a Descendant song with us that we used to cover. And yeah, so we got to know those guys, just from playing with them, and they were just a joy, but they were just so good, they were, and I don't know what, I guess before getting to know them, I always thought that they were just years older than I was, or years older than, the Vacant Andys were. And come to find out they're only a year older than I am. And they were killing it, and stuff. And so we have a lot of mutual respect musically and stuff. And we also had a lot of fun. We weren't playing, sometimes we'd be out fishing with them and, and stuff like that. So they were great guys to be around.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's important, right? Because you want to be around people who are not, fun to be around.
Yeah, it definitely was for me. I know there's plenty of people that put up with whatever for, musical genius or however they want to feel, about that within their own bands, and, people like the turmoil and stuff like that. I don't really like it that much. And having gotten out of the army and then back at, like, I was in the Vacant Andys when I was in high school with my brother and this guitarist Steve Sheridan, and then Steve Sheridan left to go to college, and we had another guitar player for like a battle of the bands. So we always had kind of a rotating lineup for the Vacant Andys, and then I left, and they had a different bass, or the singer that was when I left became the bass player, and they got a different singer. So there's been a lot of rotation for the Vacant Andys. But when I came back from the army, I mean, I just had a little bit of a different perspective. It was hard for me to make friends. So like people that cause turmoil like that to me they're not very interesting to me, and I don't necessarily want to be around it. So it is important to me, and bands are like brothers, but I have two brothers, so I know the difference between when people are just being assholes or whether they're being like brotherly love type thing. I know it very well. So so I don't like to be around the brotherly love is hard enough. It's hard enough to deal with.
Right.
My brother Daryl and I have been playing music on and off, since we were easily like 12 to 14. I think I started playing bass when I was 14, and he started playing drums a year early. I played trumpet before then for years. So we played together for a long time. So we can probably get on each other's nerves right away. Actually, I know we can get on each other's nerves right away. But we've also done a lot of great things together. So I know the difference between that brotherly part and when somebody's just trying to be contrarian, it doesn't seem like it would be much fun. And that's why, honestly, the Lightworkers are really like three of my best friends. I got Chris Caraba, who I've been friends with since he was in high school. Keith Mashad, who's just a brilliant singer-songwriter who I met 20 years ago, that we just hit it off. We have a lot of the same temperament. That's not always good, but at least we can get it out with each other. And then Andre Serafini, who was just one of the best, so it's great. Singer-songwriter. I love playing for singer-songwriters. Songs are my thing that I like to play for, and I get to do it with really great people right now.
Yeah. And that's great. You had a chance to kind of get back together with some of the people you've worked with over the years, and kind of things come full circle in that respect. So did you grow up in Florida? Like, is that where you were born and raised in Florida?
Yeah, I was born in Holy Cross Hospital in Fort Lauderdale, and first several years of my life was in Deerfield, and then I grew up in Boca. My dad and my parents owned a business. My dad's an auto mechanic by trade, so he owned a business in Boca. So we moved to Boca, and yeah, so that's where I grew up. And it was a fairy tale childhood, man. Like I had nothing to rebel against. My dad's a bit of a rebel anyway. He's a drag racer, likes motorcycles. He's a little bit of a hellraiser, in his own right. So we never really had to rebel against anything. We were just kind of allowed to do so many really fun and wonderful things. And I grew up in Boca. Like it was, Boca back then was just nothing bad happened in Boca. Let's just say that, you went to school and, you hung out with really great friends, and it was probably really hard to get in trouble in Boca back then.
Where'd you graduate from? What school?
Boca High. Boca High, yeah. I went to Boca High, and my brother Daryl, all my siblings, my two brothers and my sister, we all went to Boca High and graduated from there. And Boca High is that connection that kind of, I wasn't in school the same time I was with that Caraba was, or John Owens, who was in the Vacant Andys and stuff. They were in school together, but I was already at high school because I'm more than 4 years older than they are. So, but that was kind of the connection, just because they were skaters. We played, I guess it would be punk music. I don't know that we considered it punk back then, the Vacant Andys. We just considered we were just playing quirky stuff. But and they would come see us, and I think that's just how the association started happening. Like, I think Boca kids were looking for something to do, and we were one of those outlets.
Yeah. What kind of influences did you draw on when you were thinking about starting your own band?
Well, my biggest influences are, the Beach Boys are my the Beach Boys really made me want to play music, Brian Wilson. And this is a silly way to go into playing music, but when we used to be, my family used to vacation in Michigan, and we in a cabin, and there was no TV, no telephone. So we would bring records, and my dad's records. So we would play records. And my brother and I loved to just DJ, and we played all the time. And Beach Boys all summer long was like, I think we probably wore out a copy of that. And but on the backside of it had Brian Wilson, and as the leader of the band, and he's the oldest brother. He was playing bass and singing, and I was like, man, that sounds like a good thing. And my brother Daryl is the wild one, like the really wild one, and he was definitely more like Dennis Wilson, like drummer style. And so that hit, and then we ended up getting into like my brother was into a little bit more like the metal stuff, like the popular metal stuff, hair metal. And it's not to say that I wasn't listening to that stuff at all. But I liked, he would go buy when we were in high school, he'd go buy the new Skid Row CD. I'd go buy Paul McCartney's greatest hits, and stuff like. But prior to that, somehow we were introduced to, the Descendants. And then, like, when I was in high school, when I started high school, the Violent Femmes' first record came out. We were already listening to, I was listening to Husker Du, The Replacements, things like that. So when all of that stuff throughout high school, which wasn't popular, except if you were a band geek, and I was a band geek. So I was in marching band, I played trumpet, and stuff like that. So all the band kids, there's a group of band kids that always had like the underground music, whether they were listening to Black Flag or REM was taking off when I was in high school, things like that. I was in like AP Physics with kids that loved the Replacements, but they hated the Replacements records that were coming out in 88, 89, like Don't Tell a Soul and stuff. And I was like, man, I love this stuff. It's like, they're better songs, like, I wasn't into the screaming and stuff like that, part of punk rock. I really do like the melody, I love the melody of like old punk rock bands like The Damned, right? Like, there's so much great melody in there and stuff. So that really attracted me. I didn't have to rebel against anything. I got into punk rock because I liked, the melody for a lot of those bands, and Descendants and all, and Husker Du, especially after the early Husker Du stuff, and Replacements after the early stuff. Like, I liked it when they started writing songs per se, rather than bashing out these kind of teen angst type things. I don't think teen angst was necessarily something that I related to very well, because I didn't really have to. Again, I didn't have to rebel, and like, my parents are going to hate me for saying this, but it's totally true. But, I was allowed to drink beer. We had a pool table downstairs. We had all the bedrooms were upstairs. We had a pool table in our house. We were allowed to drink beer. We were allowed to shoot pool, listen to music. My parents were very supportive of our music and stuff like that. And if you drank at the house, you had to just stay there. You couldn't go anywhere. Like, I didn't have to go out looking for a kegger, looking for a party, and stuff. And maybe that slowed me down in getting outside of the band and music of, Boca Deerfield area. Like I didn't venture to Miami until later on. But it was just there for the taking, and so we just kind of made it up ourselves.
Did your parents wind up taking you to your first concert?
Uh, my first concert is my mom was there for my first concert, but it was my grandmother who bought tickets, and I believe she bought these tickets. If I'm recalling this right, she bought the because it's two. I can't remember which one I went to, but my grandma was there for both of them. So we went. It was both of them were at Sunrise Musical Theater in Sunrise, and it was either Sha Na Na or it was Wayne Newton, and I can't remember which one I went to first. But those were one of those two were my first, and the other one was probably my second. So it was I just can't remember. But I believe for Sha Na Na, my grandmother bought like the whole family tickets to go and experience it. And I love 50s music and 60s music like that anyway, so that was huge. The Wayne Newton thing, I went with my aunt, my grandma, and it was spectacular. Just, it was like I didn't get to see Elvis. So in 77, I guess maybe 76, 77, my grandmother loves Elvis. My grandmother was an Elvis fan. And she was going to take the family to go see Elvis, and we weren't allowed to go, my brother and I, because we were too young. And I'll never forget it. My mom was like, she was like, the next time he comes through, I'll take you. Well, he died either later that year or it was a year later. And so anyway, we went and saw Wayne Newton, who was, Vegas, and he put on his show and stuff. And it was pretty fun. And but my grandmother wanted to wait out back for him, and we did. We waited out back, and I actually met him. There's a photo somewhere, it's probably in my mom's house, of me and Wayne Newton, and I got like my red Wayne Newton cap on, and it was almost like the Weezer logo. The W for Wayne was almost like what the W is for Weezer now. So I'm sure there's a photo of me. I probably have an Izod shirt on or something.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I was a Boca kid, so had I not gone in the army, I probably would have been like I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Boca, and it was like if you didn't become a yuppie, like it was you did something right, I guess. But plenty of my classmates, became the ultimate yuppies, and that were portrayed in like American Psycho and stuff. So,
how many siblings do you have in your family?
I have I'm the oldest of four. So I have two brothers. I have a brother who's a year younger than I have a brother who's 7 years younger than I, and then my sister is the youngest.
And is it just yourself and Daryl that are the musical siblings in the family?
Yeah, outside of the two youngest ones, they had to play when they were in middle school. But my sister, but they both gave it up going to high school. My brother Derek's actually like wicked talented on anything. Like anything he used to play piano and trumpet and bass, and he could play drums. He could probably do it all. He doesn't stick to things too much. I think he wants to try everything probably in the world. So he had a hard time, I think, sticking to that because a lot of stuff comes easy to him. So it wasn't as big of a challenge, I don't think, for him. But yeah, outside of that, Daryl and I were the only ones that we pursued it through, from middle school to high school and way beyond. Yeah.
You said you picked up trumpet when you were in band in school. That was my first instrument in band as well. What made you decide to go with the trumpet?
So, man, it was sixth grade. I was at Zion Lutheran. And I always wanted to play. I always wanted to play guitar. That was my thing. I always wanted to play guitar. And so they offered this band class as a elective, right? And I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. So I went to band class, and I kind of sat in the back, and it was more like, a marching band, concert band type situation. And so the director was pointing at everybody like, hey, what do you want to play? What do you want to play? And everybody was electing all these marching band instruments. And I was too much of a pussy to say guitar. So I said trumpet because my dad had played trumpet when he was a kid for like a hot minute, right? So I chose trumpet off of that. And yeah, so that's how I started. And for 4 years, that was the instrument I played. I still play it. I still, my brother every once in a while gets me these recording gigs in Fort Lauderdale to go down because horn players are kind of hard to find, and especially ones that can read. And I still play it. And I get together with my friend Steve Copoletti every once in a while, do some, kind of obscure like jazz type stuff. And, hopefully we can get back into that, doing that, something different. But yeah, that was the first instrument, stuck to it. I liked it because it was lead. It was a lead melody, type for most symphonies, or bands that you're in. But I still wanted to play guitar. So 4 years later, this is I'm giving you way too much because this is really making me sound like a moron. But so my brother was playing drums. A year after I picked up trumpet, my brother started playing snare drum. He was really talented at it. And then he started playing drum set. And I decided that choosing bass, because it had less strings than a guitar, would be an easier instrument to learn to play with my brother. So those two less strings are the math that I did there as a 13-year-old kid is the reason that I played that bass is my main instrument.
Did your math work out in your favor?
It definitely worked out in my favor, man. I've had an awesome career. And I never realized, as a young kid, I didn't put it together that, playing bass with my brother, who was a drummer, we were automatically a rhythm section. And knowing, my brother Daryl and I are super close, everyone thought we were twins, right? We're a year, a month, a week and a day apart. So everyone thought we were twins. We shared everything. We did everything together. So it worked out great because it was like learning that kind of rhythm together and getting to play that. And, everybody wanted to be the guitar player, or everybody wanted to be the singer and stuff like that. And the reason I probably have played in, 30 plus bands is because there's never a bass player around, or, and if you write good songs, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll play it. Yeah, I want to do it. But I think it worked out. It worked out extremely well. Yeah, I have no regrets about that. But it was just, there's two stupid reasons why I chose the instruments that I picked. Trumpet, because I was too much of a pussy to say guitar, and then bass because it had two less strings than a guitar. So, eventually I got to the guitar, eventually.
Yeah.
But I'm no guitar player, but yeah.
Are those the three key instruments though that you play? Is there anything else that you've dabbled in besides guitar, bass, and trumpet?
Yeah. Yeah, I can play. I mean, I know keyboards. I once worked for a company that provided music arts to schools that didn't have it. Like they weren't budgeted for that, so they would outsource it. So you have to know how to play clarinet and saxophone and things like that to get elementary school kids, started on those instruments. So I used to know a lot more about that. And I graduated when I was in the Army. I graduated from the School of Music, and then afterwards I took music classes, and was more music education was kind of my direction when I was in college. Not that I finished because I was always going off to play on a tour, but so I knew the basics of those instruments, but I haven't touched them in 30 years. So if you handed me a clarinet or a saxophone, I highly doubt that recall is coming back. I've probably used up all that memory on the other 30 bands, charts, and songs that I've been playing over those years.
Sure. And kind of thinking back in this time period when you were kind of in your early beginnings, do you remember what the first local show is that you went to, and maybe where it was and what bands were playing?
First local show. Yeah, let's see. I have a hard time remembering the ones that we went to in high school. I do know one of them. It wasn't the first one, but I do remember going to see Saigon Kick at Weekends which was a teen club in Boca. No alcohol, no nothing, and they played there. Um, I saw I saw Casualties at a keg party out in West Deerfield once, and they were one of those high school bands that I loved. And back in the day, they're I guess he was playing drums for him. Glenn Borovich was in the Boca High band, and he went on and played in a whole bunch of bands down here. And now I think he's in Texas, somewhere, I think Austin. But some of those local bands, Casualties was one that was a really cool high school band. A lot of the other band. Oh, you know what? I went and saw my friend Russ Rogers play. He was in a band called Stinturion, and they played at, I think it's called Roses. Later on, it was called like the Metal Club. It was on, I think it was on Oakland and Fort Lauderdale. So we graduated high school together.
Yeah, the Metal Factory, I think it was called.
Metal Factory, yeah.
Metal Factory.
But it used to be called Roses and stuff. And when he was in high school, he played in Centurion, which was on that, the hair metal circuit in Fort Lauderdale, which was huge at that time. And he invited me down, and I went, and they let me right in, and they served me. That they didn't card me or anything like that, and that was really cool. That might be one of the first ones that I went to. And then when I was in the Army, the Vacant Andys, before I left to go to the Army, we really only played, we played a talent show. I think we played what do they call it? After you graduate, I think they have like a grad night thing on the campus to keep everybody from, getting hurt. So we played there. So we didn't do too many shows. The band kind of came about because our guitar player was in the National Honor Society, and he had to put together a talent show and stuff. So we did that. It was probably our first show ever. But when I would come home from the Army, the guys in the Vacant Andys, they were playing bars in Delray and in Deerfield and stuff like that. So I would go see them. Play. And then as soon as they were done, I'd hop on my motorcycle and ride it back to Fort Stewart, Georgia, just to make it in time for formation, and stuff. So that was pretty wild. And then seeing Quit at I think it's called the American Deaf Club. It was this club for deaf people, and it's on Sample and 95. And I don't remember exactly whether I was in the Army or out, or even if it was before that we saw them there. But it was just, I thought it was crazy that a band was playing a place where deaf people get together, but they would have bands there to raise money for the people. They weren't doing a show for deaf people. There was that's how the club raised money. So that was really that was cool seeing them there. That was kind of a like, holy crap, these guys are great.
When you went to the Army, you were obviously pretty young. How old were you? 18?
Yeah, I was a week over 18. Yeah, I went in August 29th, and my birthday's on the 22nd. So yeah, I had already enlisted in the Army in February. I was going in the Army as a musician, so you have to audition beforehand, and they come around and they recruit at high schools, and I didn't want to do it, but my band director thought it was a great idea, so I did it and passed the audition. So then they kind of hounded me for a while, and then I was like, wait a minute, they're gonna pay me to play music? And I was a naive kid who had grown up in Boca. So I was like, well, that sounds pretty interesting, and stuff. So, but had I wanted to go to college, you could opt out. You just had to be accepted to any college. So, but by the time it rolled around to actually go to basic training, I was having a couple problems at home, and my mom and I had a fight, and then I was finally like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just getting out of here. So I just left. and it was quite the experience for leaving.
Were you the first person in your family who enlisted in the military, or did you have anyone else that you knew that did enlist and was in a different branch or similar?
I was the first that enlisted. My dad was drafted into Vietnam. So he definitely didn't enlist. But my dad was drafted when he was 24, which is pretty old, because they changed the physical. My dad wasn't. They didn't consider my dad physically fit from when he was 18 to 24. But then in '66, Johnson changed all the. When Westmoreland wanted to make a massive, influx of soldiers into Vietnam, they changed all the, physical rules. So then my dad was drafted, and he didn't talk bad about the army too much. I'm sure he didn't want to do it. He had to spend a year and 1 day in Vietnam because when he was there, it was a leap year, and they wouldn't they wouldn't let you out. They had to get that extra day in. So he spent 2 years in the army. It was an experience for him. So I didn't really have the negative side of it. He never really spoke negatively about it, but I will say he didn't really speak too much about any potential PTSD or anything that he would have had from that, and stuff. But so yeah, my dad and I are actually the only two that have in my family for, I mean, I don't know how old my dad's going to be 80 this year. So maybe out of 80 years, we're the only two that were ever in combat, so ever in that situation.
Yeah.
I think I had some relatives well, my grandfather was in World War II in the last month or something like that. So he was a Navy guy, and but he either drafted or enlisted, volunteered at the very end, and then the war was over. So, but other than that, yeah, I don't think any of my family, and we did enough. My mom's the strong person for that, because my mom was actually dating my dad, and then she had to see her firstborn go. So my mom's probably the strongest for all of that than any of us.
You need that balance. That's important too. The time frame, though, you kind of put this. Was this around the time of Desert Storm?
Yeah. So I was in the Army from '89 to '92. So I was I was stationed at Fort Stewart, Georgia, like I said, and with the 24th Infantry Division band. And then during wartime, the band we augment the MPs, which I had no idea about. So you become basically you help them with guard duty. That's pretty much what we did. And then so we went there. We went to Saudi, and right before during Desert Shield, because Desert Storm didn't happen until January 16th of '91. So all those months leading up to that, the band would do its best, and especially during Christmas time, we actually toured around. My first tour, no, actually that's not my first tour, but my second tour was touring around all the units in Saudi Arabia before we went to Iraq, and doing a Christmas concert, basically. And I played trumpet in certain bands, and I played bass in the rock band. And
did you have a favorite Christmas song to play?
I gotta tell you, I don't remember any of the Christmas songs that we played, but the quote unquote rock songs that we played, it was whatever was popular at that time, and it wasn't very good, right? For popular music wasn't that great at that time, and most of the guys that were in the rock band were into hair metal. So it was, I know we did a Poison song. We did Sweet Home Alabama, which was a kicker for all those, all those infantrymen and stuff like that are out there, and everybody's missing home. So, there were hits like that. I think our commander, he loved Margaritaville, which I can't stand Jimmy Buffett, but I think we would have to play. He was a piano player, so he would sit in, I think, with us on some things like that. Yeah, I don't remember any of the Christmas songs. I do have a favorite Christmas song. My favorite Christmas song is Sleigh Ride. So we might have played that, but and I only like the instrumental versions of Sleigh Ride. I don't really like the singing ones. But yeah, so we toured around with that, and then when Desert Storm happened, the instruments were put away, and then I was part of a 14-person team that traveled with the commander of the the Major General McCaffrey of the 24th Infantry Division. So we were part of that security kind of, the guards that checked all the IDs and stuff going into the command center, things like that. But yeah, it was quite an interesting time for a 19-year-old, who didn't know shit about Shinola, right? Like growing up in Boca, like I didn't know how many people in the world hated each other. So,
What would you say was the toughest day you ever had when you were overseas in Saudi Arabia and just in that part of the world in the Middle East during that time period?
Toughest day. Toughest day might be the day I was flown back from Basra to Saudi. I went to one of the phone banks, and AT&T used to have these giant tents set up where you could call home. You could call home to your family and stuff. And I was next to an infantryman who was crying to his parents, about the people that he had shot and killed. And he already couldn't deal with that. And he was easily my age or younger. And I had just gotten back from that. And mentally, I hadn't thought about that part. So before I left, my dad gave me this advice, and people may not like this, but my dad gave me this advice. He said, do whatever it takes to come home, and then we'll sort it out later, right? Because when you're out there, it's life or death, and it's already beyond the part of reasoning, right? So you're not reasoning anymore. So that's where my mindset was, right or wrong. That's where my mindset is, and but when I came back, I was just going to call home, and man, listen to this guy cry to his parents about the people that he had killed was definitely one of the toughest to listen to, because I just hadn't wrapped my young mind around that part of it yet. I hadn't wrapped around that. Okay, well, we're getting ready to go home, and now we're gonna have to sort stuff out. Like I've never. I was 19 who grew up in Boca. I didn't have to sort anything out yet, in my life. And so that was strange. And, it definitely was one of those things where I was like, yeah, I want to get out. And life's too short. I realized right then and there, life was too short. And I wanted to get out, and I wanted to play music especially with my brother and my friends. And because that's all I ever wanted to do. And I still had a year and like a quarter to go before I was going to be out. And they weren't going to let me out early. So that was tough. The next year, and 3 months were really tough, because I knew I didn't want to be there, and they wanted me there. I was 19, combat veteran, 6 foot, in great shape. I was like the All-American. If they could have put me on a poster, they would have, right? And they wanted that, but I didn't want to do it anymore. Like at that time I realized that like there's a really good chance if I go overseas again that you get killed.
Yeah.
Like it's not a guarantee that you come home. So that was definitely one of the tough times, and I thought about that ever since. And I can see that kid on the phone trying to curl up into the phone booth. That half phone booth, like trying to curl into it, because he was just having he couldn't process what he had done. And I mean, holy smokes. I mean, that happens to a lot of people. So.
What kind of influence did those experiences have on your music that you could kind of pick out, whether it would be at that time or maybe even years later? Was there any influence or any impact that those experiences had on you musically?
Yeah, I think the biggest influence is a super positive one, that I enjoy it. I enjoy playing live more than anything. I love getting together with guys and playing. I like working hard at it, and stuff. So I really enjoy those. I enjoy those moments. And, a lot of people always comment, I have these quirky little dance and, dancing like moves that when I'm playing that are subconscious. I don't know that I'm doing them, but you know, they always point it out, and I'm usually smiling when I'm playing. I hardly smile during the day, but when I'm playing, I usually am smiling, you know, and yeah, I just get a lot of joy out of that, uh, and working hard at it. I wanted to work hard to be, you know, a really, you know, good to great bassist, and wanted to be a better singer, and you know, wanted to help people get their songs to where they wanted them, you know, like I was all about it. I find a lot of joy in those things. So that's the biggest thing that it taught me experience wise. I mean, as far as the negative, you know, like those kind of harsh things, those manifest themselves outside of the music part. You know, they manifest. I had a hard time making friends. I don't, you know, I don't deal with stupidity very well. I don't like, you know, I can be really short. Some people used to refer to me as surly all the time. You know, I'm, you know, when I was younger, when, you know, when after I got out, you know, I was probably very quick to, you know, quick to respond physically to a lot of things. Um, you know, the guys, we were just going over a text message to Vacant Andys earlier this week, and Johnny O was like, called me, they used to call me Trained to Kill, because when I would get mad, they would be like, dude, watch out, he's trained to kill, you know, and he used that last week. And he hasn't called me that in fucking 15, 20 years, I swear. And I was just like, I was remembering those type of things, you know. So they manifested themselves outside of that, not in the music, you know, and stuff, but probably in the situations, you know, bar situations when you're, you know, when you're young and growing up, you're playing, you know, you're playing, even if you're playing good bars, but mostly you're playing shitty bars, right? You know, there's always drunk assholes in there, and I don't like, and if I'm not the drunk asshole, I don't like other drunk assholes. So, you know, that's the unfortunate part about drinking, right? But so that was always tougher for me that way, because I'm super protective already. I'm the oldest brother. Now I'm super protective because I'm, you know, in a confined space, and I notice people that I probably am not going to enjoy. So, you know, confrontation wise, that type of stuff, and being angry or surly and stuff was outside of what I was actually doing musically. But I don't think that I would venture to say that um, people mix those two things when they recognize me. You know, they might mash those two things up, but they're completely separate in my mind.
So when you were playing shows and maybe you noticed something going on in the pit or something like that, did you ever get, you know, angry
Yeah.
or frustrated? Did you ever take your aggression out on someone because you saw maybe a girl got pushed or something like that? You know, did you ever have any of those moments where you kind of lost control and got really angry?
Yeah. Most famously, and my band loves this story. I don't know how great it is of a story, but we were playing Happy Days in West Palm. And you know, there was a skinhead faction up in West Palm back in those days, you know, and stuff. And Vacant Andys were playing, and these two girls, you know, were up front, and they were dancing to us playing. And you know, Johnny O and Chris Carava, you know, they're good looking guys, you know, like they always attracted women. So, you know, so the girls were up there listening and stuff. Well, I guess their brothers and or boyfriends got pissed about the situation, and they were skinheads, and they came up, so they started, you know, scowling and being in the front of the stage while we were playing, and they were going after Chris mainly. And you know, they were hitting his like pedals and stuff like that, and he said something to them like, you know, said something to the effect of, you know, like, hey, leave my stuff alone, you know, like, you know, he went at him because Chris doesn't really back down from anything. But when I heard him say that, I was like just assessing the situation. And so we started the next song, and they started messing with it, and we stopped in the middle of the song, and I took my bass off, and I was like, I'm gonna crush your fucking skull in right now. And like the whole place went crazy, and they went, and you know, my friends ended up tackling them outside, bringing them outside, and then I raced out to go fight. Chris was like pulling me back, you know, like don't do that. And then we were loading out, and I was like, we're done playing here. We're not playing for a bunch of skinheads, and stuff. And so we were loading out, and that the kid who was the main offender was across the street, and Chris was over there talking to him. Was because Chris was a counselor. He was a school counselor. He was like, camp counselor and a school counselor. So he's over there just trying, he's trying to reason with it. And I'm just like, I'm yelling across the street to the guy, like, what are you doing across the street? Come on over. Let's, Chris is trying to lower the threat level here. And I'm just like, I can't turn it off, at the time. So after that, then I was, there's another guy in the scene that we called Skull Crusher for other reasons, but for that particular time, they gave me that moniker. And yeah, I was, I would get angry with that type of situation, and it just, and it got out of control, especially if you were picking on my brothers, like John and Chris are my brothers, I was like, I'm super protective of it. And, Chris was de-escalating the whole situation. And, most of the time, Chris and I are on the same page for everything. But for that particular situation, I wanted to fight. Now he was definitely right. I'm not gonna say he probably was right. He was definitely right, because I have no idea how many other skinheads were there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know who was around the corner or what was going on. And it definitely wouldn't have been a one-on-one type of fight. So he was probably best for it. He was probably more in tune into the scene anyway, that I wasn't, I was pretty fixated on one person. So terrible story. Johnny and Daryl will laugh their ass off about that one. Chris probably laugh a little bit, but embarrassing stories for me.
Well, Chris was there and he helped to sound like try to diffuse the situations where it didn't escalate and someone could get really, really hurt. So
yeah, and he's always been great at that. He doesn't, he doesn't back down, but he would rather people understand. It was a misunderstanding because right. John Owens had actually said something. I think he had said something like, "Thanks to the Vacant Andys dancers in between songs." And they took offense to that. But when they looked up, John had turned around the tune and Chris was up at the mic. And they thought it was him, so they went and got their brothers or boyfriends or whatever, to come out there, and it was just a total misunderstanding. And Chris was probably trying to explain that to him, and which was for the better, and I was antagonizing, which was for the worst.
Well, hindsight's always 20/20, right? So yeah. There you go.
Nothing happened. It was just it's sure. Stupid testosterone-driven guys, and I was, man, mid to late 20s at that time, and I felt invincible at the time. Whether that's totally not true, but that's how I felt at the time.
Sure, of course. And kind of talking about the Vacant Andys also just in this time period, but also maybe even before or beyond. Did you have any favorite Vacant Andys shows that you remember playing? Maybe some of the other bands on the bill, where the show was. Any memories you want to share about some of your favorites?
Yeah, we loved playing Cheers, right? Gay, the owner of Cheers down in Miami, she, for whatever reason, she loved us. I think here's one of the reasons she loved us, and it wasn't because, I mean, we were a good band, right? And we were always on time. We always played, our whole set, and stuff like that. But during the time we played to Cheers, we were practically like a house band at Cheers. It felt like we were playing there like 2 times a week. But that was during like the straight edge movement, like all of Miami was into the straight edge thing, which I had no idea that even existed. Like I didn't know. I knew what straight edge was because I think Chris and John probably explained it to me, but I didn't know. I was like, I'm 25 to 27. I've been drinking beer all my life. I'm gonna have a beer. Well, Gay loved us for that. So she would give us a case of Heineken every time we played because nobody else was buying beer at the bar during those times, even for our shows, like we weren't bringing out the degenerates or anything like that, but everybody was straight edge. So everybody was kind of afraid to drink. So she loved it. So we loved playing Cheers, and we got to open up for, for Jawbox, for Weston, for the specials, like all kinds of odd, like different bands, right? Because we didn't fit into a category necessarily. Some people called us, an emo band. Some people called us an indie rock band. Sometimes we played like hardcore-ish type songs. Sometimes they were just straight up punk. But Gay didn't care. And you know what? The scene didn't really care back then. You didn't have to have a hardcore lineup, and stuff. And then some of the other shows, like we played the Attic with the Meatmen, and that was insane. Like, I mean, Tesco V is just an insane person, right? And it has their own thing, and that crowd probably couldn't have cared less, but they were great. Like, I mean, when you're playing with the Meatmen, the people came there for the show, for the Meatmen Spectacular, and stuff. So open up shows like that. We also opened up for Sick of It All at the Attic. Also, we did a tour, Newfound Glory's first tour. We did, we played, we rented a Ryder box van, and the two of us, went through the whole Eastern, up and down the coast, and a little bit in, maybe Midwest. And that was a blast. But yeah, you know what? Taking the stage with the Vacant Andys for this lineup, taking the stage with the Caraba and John Owens and my brother lineup was always wonderful. People thought sometimes we hated each other, but it was because we're brothers, right? It's that brotherly love. We took the piss out of each other nonstop, like nonstop. And but I loved playing those shows, taking the stage with those guys. Like we just knew it was going to be so fun for us, and we were pretty confident at being a band. Whether it came off like that or not, we had a blast doing it. Played some really fun shows, and like what's the suburb of Jacksonville? I think it's called Orange Park, I think. Like played up there at like a Lions Club, type, we played all those shows. It didn't matter. A lot of shows without stages, right? And stuff. So we had a blast doing those things. Playing Gainesville, be it at a frat party, or or playing like a house, or things like that, playing Rickenbackers, back in the day. So a lot of those, but I will say maybe the Jawbox one might be the one I remember, because I think I feel like we were on our A game for that, and Jawbox is just brilliant, and that was just a pleasure, I think, to get to play that.
When you had played some of those other shows, you mentioned there was a tour with Newfound Glory. You played some other locations, maybe outside of Florida.
Yeah.
Were there other Florida bands that also played along with you, or you can kind of remember, hey, we played this gig in Orlando, and these Florida bands played that show as well. Like, what do you remember from some of the other local bands besides Newfound Glory that played with you guys?
Oh, we played with Peterbilt in like Orlando. They were a St. Pete band. They were so awesome. We played with Gus from Miami, but we played like their last show when they were in Gainesville. We played at their house. Let's see who else. Yeah, we played with a lot of really cool. So I remember playing a show in Orlando, and I'm not going to be able to recall this, but Matchbox 20, prior to Matchbox 20 calling themselves Matchbox 20, they were called something else. And we played some like Orlando music festival, with them. Like we weren't billed right next to it, right together or something like that, but we played that. We played Rickenbackers, and then right after our show, which was a punk rock show, Sister Hazel was playing at Rickenbackers. So let me tell you, the difference in that crowd was like amazing, right? It was like a bunch of quote unquote punk rockers and Rickenbackers, and then they cleared out, and then everybody who was wearing khakis and a white shirt and a white University of Florida hat like was in there for Sister Hazel, and stuff. And it was, I think it was kind of before they had that hit single, which I can't even recall. Not, they're a great band. I just wasn't a fan, but things like that. Let's see, who else did we play with? I mean, we loved playing with Quit whenever we could get on a Quit show. We played, I mean, there's probably not too many bands that we didn't play, but we played with Fay Wray. I did a show once where it was Quit, Fay Wray, and Vacant Andys. So I played in all three bands at for that.
What was that like for you having to play three different? Because I mean, all three are quite different. I mean, there's some similarities here and there, but for the most part, three completely different sounding bands. So what was that like?
Oh, it was the best, man. It was so awesome. Because I love all the songwriters for those bands, right? Like Caraba was writing most of the songs for the Vacant Andys, and I obviously love Chris's songs and followed him into, when he was writing the songs that became Dashboard. Um, Fay Wray was Rob Coe and Jeff London writing, Jeff probably writing more of the lyrics and Rob writing all the music. I still play with Rob Coe and the Enablers now. And then playing with, Addison writing all those Quit songs. I mean, getting to play that. So to me, I don't like, they're not, they're different as far as speed wise and, like the kind of performance that I have to play on bass, but song wise, they're just great songs. So Chris was really figuring out how to write really good, fun, indie rock, maybe post-punk type songs in the Vacant Andys, and then would go on to write, these really anthemic, songs, singer-songwriter songs that became more of a band after, the initial Dashboard splash. But Rob Coe's still writing brilliant, like just straight up, rock songs that, have a little bit punk influence, whether it's super chunk or country influence, and stuff. And I bet the next thing that Addison puts out or plays on, the Ship Thief stuff's awesome that he plays on. And if he ever put out any of his own stuff, I'm sure it'd be brilliant too. It was a blast to be able to play all those things. I played with my brother in the Vacant Andys, and then at that show, but the rest of it was Andre and I. So, it was great playing all those things. Like there was turmoil in each band, given on any given day, but it was brotherly type stuff. And, some of it might have, broken up Fay Wray at the, later on, and then calling it quits, later on and stuff. But they all seem to come back around for like this, for doing like a reunion here and there, stuff. So, I don't think they were viable enough to sustain being a band, and especially as we get older, and have families and all that. But they were just great to play with. I never tried to get in the middle of. I mean, I was always in the middle of the Vacant Andys stuff because we were closer brothers. The rest of it, I was the new guy in both those other bands. So I was like, man, I'm here to play and play my ass off, and that's what I did. And Dre and I would do all the time, and yeah, those are really great times and fun. But I like playing those different, the different genres, and then even going like to Dashboard, that's a whole different thing, right? And playing with John Ralston and Legends of Rodeo and stuff. Like playing with John Ralston is, such a fun thing because he comes up with all these different songs, and I have to play different techniques and what they call for, and approach it completely differently. And I love doing that. I love thinking about it and having fun doing those type of things.
Yeah, I was always a big fan of the Legends of Rodeo stuff and Recess Theory before that. They were one of my favorite local bands to see, and I saw them play with Further Seems Forever. I can't even remember the amount of times I saw both of those bands play the same show. It's been a lot of times, and you almost would forget for a moment. And I had the same conversation with Damian Moyle in the last episode. You forget that these bands are local because they're so good. Not that being local makes you bad or anything like that. No. But they just have their stuff together. It just seems that way, and it's great shows. So.
I agree. You asked me like, what are the local bands? And I'm thinking like, holy shit, like I didn't even pull Further Seems Forever, and we played with them, and it's like I forgot they're a band from right down the road, we would be on some hardcore shows too, we'd play. I don't know if I know we used to play with As Friends Rust in its first incarnation, we would play shows with them. So, and I love them. As Friends Rust was actually one of those bands that I would drive down to Cheers just on my own to go see. And I love playing with that. Yeah, I totally missed out on like a ton of. When you asked me about that, my recall, I didn't list. I mean, all those great local bands playing with Pivot or Donut Run at the time, and like, and some of those bands I would end up being in later on, like, recording with Pivot and playing in Pivot for years and stuff. And, like, there's a lot of those bands. Everybody was pretty friendly, I rarely can recall people that weren't, you couldn't associate with, and it was fun. It didn't matter what genre it was. I mean, I think the genre stuff came a little bit later, maybe closer into 2000s, where everybody wanted to split everything into minute, but back then it was just like, hey man, you're just, you're up next, is like, hey, what kind of band are you? We're the ones up next. That's it, so
I think also too, when you started going to a lot of local music stores, they were starting to really categorize everything by the subgenre and then the subgenre of that. So whether it was in your own mind, you'd go to a lot of independent record stores and you would just see everything just broken out into all these different subgenres. So you'd kind of say, I'm listening to post-hardcore, and like, just because that's how it was broken out in some of the record stores and what have you. So
I had that happen to me. I was on a tour. I was a hired gun for a band, and they were talking about a bunch of the guys in the van were talking about this band they were listening to. And somebody said something to the effect like, oh, this is shoegaze, garage, and then had another adjective. And another guy was like, no, it's more like garage, shoegaze, and then that adjective. And it mattered the order that they put it in. And then they asked me what I thought, and I was like, it sounds like fucking rock and roll. Like, it sounds like rock. And I'm like, you guys are getting too worried about how it's categorized. Just sit back and listen to it, And that really made me feel like I was the old guy in that van, which I was, but it was just like, like, oh, I can't, like, who has the time for that?
Maybe that's why you were at that moment in your life where you were older and you were like, okay, stop. I notice that a lot now as you kind of got older with a lot of younger kids. They'll really, especially there's so many other subgenres of music that didn't exist back then that exist now. And you're like, okay, so it's like punk rock. Is that what it is? And they're like, oh no, it's this, and this. Like, okay.
Yeah, like the one that first off, I'm not into house music. And maybe because I haven't heard something that's blown me away. And Norm Brannon from Texas is a reason, and probably hate me for saying that. But I feel like house music and hip hop have like the most unbelievable like breakouts. House music, like if you call something that's electronic or electronic music and be like, no, that's house. And then something house comes up, or something electronic goes, and you say, "Oh, I think that's house," and they're like, "No, that's not house. That's dubstep." This, but like all these, subgenres, and I'm like, dude, can you just hit play and let me enjoy it? Because I can't get, I get the punk rock and the rock and roll, and I was even calling, like Motley Crue, Poison, hair metal, and stuff like that, but in the grand scheme of things, man, if we could just keep the categories to a minimum, that would probably be helpful for everybody.
Well, this is a good segue to talk about one of the categories of genres that some of the music you've played in gets associated with is the term emo. What do you remember when you first heard that term? A lot of bands I remember back then maybe didn't care for the label or didn't really associate with it. But I find that later, in all these later years, a lot of bands that maybe got pinned with that label are now like, okay, well, we know we're an emo band. That's kind of what we are, what we were. So what do you remember when you first heard that term, and what's it been like for you as the term has evolved from its early beginnings to where it is today?
So the first time I heard the word emo was at Cheers. We were playing a show, and I actually posted a photo the other day of some old Vacant Andys photos that I found. And one is a kind of a close up of Chris, and we're playing at Cheers, and taped to his mic stand is this piece of paper. Now, at the time, it was taped to his, when it was taped to his mic stand when we were playing, it said emo. And then I think once we realized what it said on it, I think John or Chris probably ripped off the E and it just says Mo on it. And Mo was like a derogatory term for, for like an idiot in our circle of friends. We'd be like, dude, you're such a Mo. So I think now the E's off of there. That is one of the first times I ever heard emo. And I remember asking the guys afterwards, like, what the hell is emo? And they're like, oh, eventually getting to the part where it stands for emotional. And I was like, well, we are emotional. We're totally emoting up here, like wrapping my head around that, subgenre was just like, it's like, isn't all music, like if you're doing it right, isn't it all emotional? But I guess in the subtext of being post-punk and being emotional, it had to have its own kind of thing. Now, when I asked who were emo bands at that time, so this has got to be 96-ish, maybe. I guess that photo is probably 96-ish. I was like, well, who's emo? Like I hadn't heard the term yet. And even though that term had been used prior, I just wasn't aware of it. And happily not aware of it. But I didn't realize I was listening to bands that were considered emo, like Rites of Spring and, like Texas is the Reason and Sensefield. And like I loved all these bands. They had such, especially Sensefield and Texas. And the melody was so great. And, listening to John Bunch sing is still one of my favorite things. And like, I was like, okay, well, then that's not a bad term. But you did not want to be labeled with that back then. At that particular time, I was like, well, okay, cool, they can call us emo. And I think even in like some interviews when they asked Daryl and I, because we were oblivious to emo being a bad term, they would be like, they're like, are you guys emo? And be like, yes, we're emo. But Chris and John were like, dude, you don't want to be emo at that time. And then you realize that term's not going away. Like years later, you realize, oh, that is sticking around just like punk rock is sticking around, just like, alt country has stuck around, like it's sticking around. And now you're like, okay, fine. And, later on, it was just like, you can call us whatever you want, like, I don't know how to describe our music. If that helps you describe it, sure. But it did have a negative connotation for quite a while. And, I would say people have come to love Chris's singing and Chris's songs, but they didn't always fall in love with him right off the bat, and stuff. And I don't think they knew what to make of it because he was kind of making his own path. And we were the band that was backing him at that time. And, I had stepped back from hardly, I think John and I wrote a couple songs, in a couple years, John maybe a little bit more because he sang a little bit more. But I had almost written all the Vacant Andys songs music wise prior to Chris coming into the band. And I was like, oh man, this is a level above. Like, all right, I'm going to write the parts to these songs and get them to where they need to go or help arrange. But we had no idea that, my brother and I definitely didn't know, like, oh, this is emo. But it's funny you bring that up because I just posted that photo. And when I did post that photo, I was like, that's the first time that we were called emo. The Vacant Andys were called emo. It's the first time that I ever heard Chris being called emo also because it was the same time. And then having Johnny O and Chris explained to me that was emo. And then going back and going, oh, well, I've been listening to emo bands and I'm going to continue to listen to emo bands, but it doesn't matter. And then, then finding out that the Get Up Kids are considered emo and Braid is considered emo, I was like, okay, well, like I get it. I really love these bands. There's no reason for me not to, like I didn't realize, Jimmy Eat World was in quote unquote emo band. And now maybe they've gotten out of that moniker a little bit more pop, and stuff because they've had more hit singles than anybody else. But I don't know. It's just it was one of those things. I'm an eye roller. I roll my eyes at everything. My wife hates it, but it's just another thing that I was just like, okay, fine. Like it's not going to it's not going to stop what we were doing. Like we were going to continue to be who we were. But it was, I didn't like that it was negative and people were calling us that. That bothered, it bothered me until it was like, okay, everyone's saying it. I'm just going to accept it. But yeah, I mean, I don't get the term. I actually, I don't get it. I don't get why it's negative, and maybe it's not negative anymore. But that's not my fight.
Yeah, it's also evolved a lot, like most genres do, and then they spitball into all these other different things from the way that you dress to how you carry yourself to different how you speak and that sort of thing. So it morphed a great deal over the years. But I think during the height of Dashboard Confessional, I think maybe more labeled emo than, let's say, Vacant Andys were. So did you get a lot of that with Dashboard Confessional when you were playing with them?
Yeah, for sure. But we were on the same label with Alkaline Trio, and we were the Get Up. I mean, the Get Up kids made Vagrant Records, right? I mean, I don't mean that to dismiss Vagrant Records or anybody else, but they were the prize band on Vagrant Records at that time, and Saves the Days on. You know what I mean? I was like, if they're calling us emo and all these other bands, I'm like, I'm pretty fine with that whole collection of friends and bands, and then Hey Mercedes coming along, and I don't know whether I don't even know what, if they were considered emo or, Hot Rod Circuit or all those bands that we ended up playing with. And at that point, no one cared. To be honest with you, it was like we were riding high. We were finally paying some bills with playing music. So we were excited about it. And if that was a term that was easy for the media and for fans to relate to this collection of bands, then we were perfectly fine with that. It was just part of that. Well, it's like an abbreviation to get to this.
Sure.
And I think that we were accepting about it. I mean, there was definitely some pushback, and I think anybody in those bands has this same type of reaction of, like, oh God, emo, but okay, like I don't think it's as derogatory anymore, like you say, it's not. And eventually, once we got some recognition or somebody was willing to distribute the songs nationally and internationally, if that was the one word that helped people find the music, that was really the more important thing that we cared about, was that people found the music. And if when it started with Facebook, or when hashtags started coming around, and stuff like that, later on, it was like, man, if that's what you typed in and all of a sudden a dashboard link showed up and you clicked onto that and you found something better, you know what, good for you.
Right.
I'm happy about that.
And
But
And
yeah.
Dashboard was really pioneering, I think, for the genre too, because you think about the MTV Unplugged, like prior to Dashboard playing that, you would have bands like Pearl Jam, Eric Clapton, Nirvana, and a whole host of other bands that have played this prestigious event that everybody would tune in for and watch on MTV. So what was it like for you guys getting that call to play at MTV Unplugged when there weren't other bands that I can think of that were in the similar vein that played a show like that?
Yeah. So I'm a huge Soul Asylum fan. So Soul Asylum doing Unplugged, like for me, like that was the one I was like, oh, Soul Asylum played, But yeah, when we got the call, it was really when we were told, I was just like, my mind was kind of blown. But I'll have to say, at this particular time, the learning curve for Dashboard, from me and Chris being in a van playing people's basements and houses for 2.5 months, and then having Mike join and it becoming a band and putting out places, like that learning curve was so steep. It was so steep for You know, it was very, very unique. So when all this stuff was happening, it was it was like a lot. It was cacophonous, right? Because now we had record companies and booking agents, and then you had publicists coming on. You had radio people coming on because Screamin' was hitting on the radio, and then you had who else did you have? Besides the publicists were like not just magazine publicists, getting it. Now it was TVs. Now they were trying to get the song into TV shows because that was a big thing going on at that time, and it was really it was immense. Chris handled it extremely well. Not to say he had it, every day was golden, but he handled it extremely well. Me as a hired gun was, I tour managed Dashboard while I was playing in it for a while. And then it got so big, I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like the business part of it was taking up so much time that the playing part wasn't. The playing part, which is the part I enjoyed so much, was like a blip on the screen. And so we got a tour manager, which was also added, more people, right? We had tour managers, then we had merch people and tech people who all have become like family, right? But at that time, it was really hard to take in. And for me, when that thing came, when MTV Unplugged came out, I was just like, I think I was in shock. And part of me, I was in shock, and I probably didn't celebrate as much. Was just like, holy shit, like this is happening, like. And Chris and I probably celebrated one-on-one like that, and then he had to probably do a ton of business part side of it, and I probably could have gone to the bar because I was a hired gun, right? So I probably could have been a better friend in that way and gone with him to like kind of field all these things. But he was spectacular at doing that, and it's probably why he still has a career now to this day. And but yeah, it was intense. And then we had never rehearsed we'd always rehearsed for tours, right? But this was like rehearsing for one show, and we were at like SIR Studios in New York, rehearsing, putting together the set list. How's this gonna go? Like, it was unique because I had acoustic basses sent out to me so I could get used to playing these extremely large instruments, and it was it was in the making for a while, getting ready. Like we were pros at doing what we do, but now they were asking us to play unplugged, which wasn't far-fetched for Dashboard, okay? Not at all. But for me, I was playing a totally different instrument, like, in my hands. And just tying that down, how are we going to make it sound as big or enjoyable? And you know what? It was the fans, the fans singing along created that extra choir, which was almost symphonic, and stuff. So it was quite huge. I don't get nervous about playing live, but and Chris does. And man, it's a good thing Chris and I are like brothers, because I was so mean to him every time he would get ready to go on stage for anything. Because he was he had a bit of stage fright. I don't think he has it now. I think he has it way under control. But back then he had some stage fright, right? He was always the center of it, and stuff. And I would just say like, quit being a bitch and get on, or stuff like that. Like I wasn't a nice friend about it. But to me, it was like that hard older brother love, like, you'll be fine, just get out there, like I wasn't sensitive to it, you know what I mean? And yet we were getting ready for MTV Unplugged. It was like the biggest thing, right? And then you walk in this room and you're kind of in the round, and then you have all these lights, which is a television kind of thing, which we had done, we had done Conan, and stuff like that, but that was a little different. It's a different element, right? The lights are just right in front of you. You come out, play for the audience, set up a little bit more like a show. But when you're in there, you have all this TV production, and then you have your production and the way it's staged. And we didn't have stage production like that. And we weren't taking cues from directors and things like that. So it was different. And I probably could have been more, I was supportive, but I probably could have been more sensitive to supporting him in a different way. But I wasn't, even at 29, 30 years old, I wasn't that involved to assist. My way of helping him was, pat him on the butt or yell at him to go do it. You got this, I always believed in him, but I probably wasn't sensitive to what he was actually feeling at the time. Or maybe even the other band members, like Mike could have been nervous and maybe John was nervous. And I wasn't picking up on some of those cues. That's, unfortunately, it's just because I probably wasn't as mature as I should have been even though I was older than them to feel that out. But it was huge, man. I mean, like, it was a mind-blowing situation to be like, holy crap, we're getting play on MTV Unplugged, and they couldn't have been nicer. They couldn't have been more accommodating. I'm sure they'd handled, I know they've handled bigger rock stars, but they probably handled tougher rock stars, right? And we were just happy to be there. And it was more of a co-op, we always approach shows like a co-op. So it was really super enjoyable. It was a long day. It was a long day, man. There was, mistakes made and recuts and stuff like that. But it was a big, huge, fun day. It, Screaming Infidelities changed my life. And then MTV Unplugged definitely changed my life, so.
When you're playing a show like that, did you all kind of have anything going on the stage that people may not have noticed to kind of keep the mood light? Any jokes or any inside things you had going on, even while the show was going on for the MTV?
You muted right at the end there. I think that's the end of the question.
Yeah. So for the MTV Unplugged, were there any jokes or anything going on to keep the mood light that you can remember?
Well, I mean, it was a pretty light situation getting like in the green room. Well, okay, I was late. I don't know whether they were late. So I had gone out and I had bought Joe Walsh's Greatest Hits. So I had that playing in the green room, jamming in the green room. So, we had Rocky Mountain Way and jamming back there. Now Chris and I, every single night on stage, there were always a couple different things, a couple different times between songs where we would do the same move with like either the neck of our guitars or we would drop our hand and let it swing. And we'd look at each other. And part of that was I was always to the left of Chris. In the Vacant Andys, I was always, to the, Chris could look left and see me. I look right and see Chris. That was the way it was in Dashboard too. And we always missed, we missed John and Daryl out there, we were still affiliated with them and they had their own band, Anchorman and stuff like that. But we would always queue up, we always had a couple of cues. And if you watch it, there's a couple moments there that Chris and I, we do our little, move to here to kind of acknowledge, like, we've been doing this for a long time together. And like, it was always like, can you fucking believe we're here? Like, like, we always believed in ourselves. We believed in the band. We believed what we were doing. We believed we were good at it. But that doesn't, you could still be the greatest guitar player, bass player. And if you're just not lucky, you don't get out there. Right. And we knew that. We worked hard at it, but there's some luck involved. People got to really love it. Our luck was our fans loved it and our fans spread it everywhere. That was the time, especially when we couldn't get our CD made because, we couldn't get the CD made fast enough. And so we'd play somebody's basement and be like, hey, go on Napster and get it, and no band was saying that because Napster was considered stealing at that time. That was during the whole Metallica, type thing. And we were like, man, go on, what was it? LimeWire, go on Napster, wherever you can get the music, go get it. So when you come here, you can sing it along with us. Like that was our MO about it. I mean, that changed later on when we had a record company and distribution that could produce those things. But then we had it for them to buy. We were lucky, man. Like we worked our asses off, and it's not all luck, and it's not all work. it has to be a really good formula of both of those things. A lot of things have to come together. They happen to come together at that time, you know. It's I, you know, even after I was out of Dashboard, you know, and starting playing in other bands, you know, you see that type of stuff. It doesn't happen to every band. And, you know, that old adage of, you know, lightning doesn't strike twice. It's really hard for it, you know, like, you know, so it was a really good, perfect storm that we helped create, fans helped create, you know, maybe the mood of music helped create it too. You know, you mentioned that we were, you know, uh, kind of forthright in that, you know, or forefront of like that emo. It was kind of like that second coming of emo. And, you know, I don't know that we were leading that. We probably should have been tucked in behind, you know, 4 or 5, 6, maybe many other bands, but we were definitely part of it, and we were proud of it, especially with the Vagrant bands and our, you know, our friends on that, and then even other people like, you know, I don't think Sensefield particularly liked being called emo, but they were a great band that we loved playing with, you know, and you know, you weren't going to shirk the name, you know, you weren't going to shirk that adjective, you know, and stuff. So it was just like embrace it, move on, keep doing what you do, and have fun.
How do you think the popularity of Dashboard opened fans up to look into other projects, Vacant Andys, for example, or maybe the agency, other bands that you guys had played in, other members of Dashboard locally? Did you feel like that helped? Did a lot of people discover other projects through Dashboard that you were aware of?
Yeah, they did. You know, it'd be a surprise when you'd end up in Phoenix, Arizona, and somebody would have, you know, a Vacant Andys cassette or something like that that they wanted you to sign or something like that. And you're like, how the hell did you guys get this? I mean, like, I didn't think it made it out of the county. You know what I mean? But they were, you know, kids are really interested in that stuff, and you know, and they want to find the lineage, right? You know, like, and you know, I love music history. I love history, but I love music history too. So I like the lineage of, like, you know, where did this new guitar player for the Stones come from? You know, it's like, oh, Ronnie Wood used to play in the Faces too. You know, you're like, you know, like, I like that type of things. And going backwards, and you know, like, when I first heard Wilco, I was like, where did these guys just pop out of? You know, like in '94, and it's like, oh, they're from Uncle Tupelo, and I'd never heard that. And I was like, oh, I love this, you know, and working backwards for sure. I think it did. People looked into the Vacant Andys. We didn't have that much stuff out with that lineup, with the lineup that they really wanted to see. We don't have much out. We have like 2 7-inches, so I think that's like 5 songs because there's 2 on one song,
But
and then maybe
they're really good 7 inches, really good songs.
and we're on like a, you know, we were on like a, I don't know whether it was AP magazine. We had a single out on one of the CDs they did, and then maybe like another compilation that Amy Fiddler put out.
The Shortest Distance.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So and some of those were the same songs, you know. So
Right.
that much. I do get asked about it all the time, and we have some stuff that we recorded forever ago. We don't have the really, I don't know. My brother probably has the masters of it. So we've always contemplated whether we could put out the rest of that stuff and then record some new stuff. You know, it's just a matter of scheduling these days, you know. But yeah, people sought it out, and then they wanted to know what other bands you played in, and you know, be it you know, especially they all knew Chris was in Further Things Forever. That's how most of them got introduced to Dashboard, probably. And then, you know, all the rest of the bands that we played in, you know, I think people wanted to know about it, where we came from, and that was sweet and was awesome. We just didn't have that much to offer them. Um, we played more live than we did recording. That's an unfortunate part, that we didn't capture all of that, because that would have been really fun to, like, you know, to be able to throw out there. But yeah, you know, I think it helped. You know, Daryl and John were doing Anchorman, which is a great band, and they did 2 really phenomenal records. And so it was like, what are the other half of Vacant Andys doing? It was like, oh shit, they're, Chris and I would always be like, dude, they're doing Anchorman. You got to hear this band. So that was always fun. And then later on, they did band number 12. Both of those bands I ended up playing in at different times, and stuff. But band number 12 was great. So I think it did bring some people. It wasn't Dashboard, so I don't know how much they loved it, or enjoyed it. I mean, some people really love the Vacant Andys. Uh, I'm sure some people really hate it. But just like everything, right? But I don't know, I don't know how people feel about it. They don't really, I think when we put out something for Vacant Andys, or even when I threw out those photos, I think they relate to it more so because of Chris than they do the Vacant Andys as a whole, which is fine, because I think they get let in, right? They're like, oh my God, and that's really fun. And maybe they go seek it out. There's a couple singles that are out on, that Fiddler put out digitally. So they maybe go listen to that and go, okay, well, that's what the early stuff was, and
Yeah.
hope they enjoy it, but if
and
not,
that
they can go back to the Dashboard records.
And the Vacant Andys, they were the kind of band that I think a lot of people associated with Fiddler Records, because the first 7-inch from the Vacant Andys was Fiddler #1. What was your relationship with Amy and the rest of the band that you can remember from that period, and maybe has it continued to this day?
So we met Amy at Cheers, because I believe she lived only like a little ways away from Cheers, um, and she was this young, driven, wonderful, girl at the time, soon to be woman, I guess. I'm not exactly sure how old she was when we met her, but she was just in tune. She had Fiddler Jones, she had her own zine. She was really into bands, and she was really social. It was, she was the social media of that kind of radius around Cheers for a super long time. We had lots of laughs, lots of fun, hanging out, especially at shows and stuff. And I don't have a stronger relationship with Amy, although I don't have a bad relationship with her. We just don't chat on the regular. I know Chris does, but she did a lot. Working on that 7-inch, putting out that 7-inch, and then like you mentioned, the Shortest Distance, like that compilation. I mean, I think there's 12 to 14 songs on there, and I think I played in like 5 to 7 of the bands that are on that thing.
You did.
Yeah, and yeah, I know. The DJ from down here, Kimba, used to DJ. I think she's still, I'm not sure about that, but whenever I would run into her, she's like, "You're such a band whore." And you're like, I just love playing songs. But Amy was awesome. We loved Amy. Amy also ended up putting out the Seville record. She ended up, she's done a lot for our group of, our collection of bands, in different ways and stuff like that. She was at Vagrant when Dashboard ended up going to Vagrant. Obviously, she put out the first Dashboard CD too.
Right.
So, Chris's EP, the Drowning EP, she put that out. So she's been a big believer. She was a big believer way back, right? Probably a bigger believer in Chris than the rest of us, but rightfully so. He was the one who was kind of, he was the handsome kid singing and writing those songs, in the band. And so she's been a great supporter. I know she's been a super friend to Chris. Yeah, we don't have anything, nothing controversial to say about her. She's wonderful. And I know she has a new book that's coming out that I'm super excited. I know Chris did the foreword for it. So excited for that, to see I believe it's photos. So I'm excited to see all the photos that are, coming out of there. She was just wonderful, like I have a bunch of, in front of me are Fiddler Jones, actually, Fiddler Jones magazine, zines and stuff like that. And, that we were in, and she even had John and I go interview the Descendants when they played at like the Button South. World's worst interview, but and I love the Descendants, but John and I did not do a great job getting that interview. All Bill wanted to do was talk about fishing, and I don't know shit about fishing, so but I think even hands down, she said this is the worst interview anyone's ever, because she would have band people go out and do interviews with other bands.
Right.
And but she still likes us after that,
Well, that's good. That's you typically don't do a lot of announcements of people coming on the podcast in advance, but you may see Amy Fiddler on the podcast in the fall talking about her book. And
nice.
Yeah, you might see her in the fall. Yep. So yeah, it'd be great to have.
That will not only be entertaining, but informative as well. Educational probably too.
Yeah.
That would be real. She's got so many, like, man, after the book, like, she needs to write like the memoir type book. That's the one that's the one I want to hear. I mean, I'm totally stoked, and hopefully she'll go like even longer than Damien went on your podcast. So we can get like every single story. But I think she would run out of breath before she could get out every story of all the bands, man. But that would be the ultimate collection.
I agree. Yeah. So yeah, something to look forward to as the year kind of progresses here. I want to pivot back, and Pivot was a band you were in too, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. So Pivot had a song on the Shortest Distance compilation, but not a lot of output. What'd you all put out? Maybe like one CD, EP, I think, or
they put out 2 CDs.
2 CDs.
Yeah. That first one. So I wasn't in Pivot, and they got a record deal, quote unquote, from Kane's Records, which was the University of Miami's student record label. So Rob had asked me to play if I would record it, because they were going from a 3-piece to a 4-piece, and their bass player was going to play rhythm, and they wanted a bass player. So they asked me about it. So I actually learned those songs and recorded them like right then and there in the studio. So it's pretty busy. It's really busy, but it was really fun. It was a good band. Those guys were all great players. Rob's still one of my good friends. He lives on the other side of Boca, but we see each other and his whole family, which is awesome. I haven't seen the other 2 guys in a long time. I haven't seen Jordan. I know Jordan's got a family and stuff like that. I'm not sure what's up with Jeremy, but so we did that record. That was really fun. For the cover of that record, which is rock, paper, scissor cuts. No, it's rock, scissor, paper cuts, something like that. And so for the cover of that record, I was actually playing guitar in Anchorman at that time, and we were playing an after. What was that? What was that tour? What's the punk rock tour that used to go around all the time? Jesus, why am I not remembering this? It's a really popular one. The Vans Warped Tour.
Warped Tour. Yeah.
Warped Tour was ending in like Jacksonville, and we were playing like an after party at one of the bars. And I was playing guitar in Anchorman. I was playing. They wanted a second guitar player, so I was playing that. And then I rode home with Henry, who was the guitar player in Anchorman at that time. And I was like, we got to get home because I got to do a photo shoot for the cover of Pivot's record. So we got home and we did it. It was actually on the garage, the roof of the garage of the house that I grew up in Boca. And one of my friend's kids, Drew Carafano, was playing like the kid, spying on the little girl and stuff like that. So yeah, Pivot was a really fun band to play in. And I ended up leaving Pivot because Fay Wray asked me to go play. And when Fay Wray asked me, I was like, ooh, this might be my way in and playing in Quit, because I knew Quit didn't have a bass player either. And so I left Pivot to go do that. And but the other version, after the Pivot was really Rob and Jordan, and then whoever played with him, I would say. I don't want to dismiss the rest of the guys, but the next record that Pivot put out was really awesome too. So if you don't have that, you should check it out. I don't know what I think it might be on Purple Skunk Records.
It is, yeah. Purple Skunk, yeah, Purple Skunk Records.
Really good record, and Rob writes really good radio style rock songs, right? They got these big, great choruses, and Rob could really sing, man. Rob could wail and hit notes, and I bust his balls all the time that he's not playing music anymore. It really it makes me mad that he's not playing, but he's got his own business and 2 daughters and stuff like that, so he's probably got his hands full. But we go fishing every once in a while, even though I'm terrible at it. But basically, I just ride in the boat with him,
which can be enjoyable too.
Yeah.
Another band you mentioned that I'm a personal fan of as well, one of my favorites that you've been in, is Seville, who may not get a lot of attention in terms of your overall catalog. I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But you all put out quite a few releases, and it was kind of like a super group in a way. It was members of Vacant Andys and The Agency, and 2 very popular South Florida bands in their own right. So, what are your memories of playing with Seville?
Seville was great. Mike and I had this idea when we were in Dashboard that we wanted to do something. We were really busy in Dashboard, so we didn't have too much time for anything else because, as Dashboard's popularity just went so fast, right? So we decided, we were like, yeah, man, we need like a little bit more of an output for a little bit more punk rock type of, thing, and to get the like juices going, right? So we chose, I was like, hey, when we get home, why don't we ask Johnny O to come up, Johnny O will come out, and originally it was just me, Johnny, and Mike. And we wrote a couple songs. We just wrote them from scratch, and Mike writes differently than John and I were used to. John and I were used to writing music and then put lyrics over it, and Mike writes it almost exactly opposite. He sings the line and then puts the chords underneath, which was a unique way for both of us to go. And I think after maybe the first or second practice, he suggested bringing in Chris Drucke from The Agency to play, and I was like, okay, so he came in, and then we started, we generated that first EP, Waiting in Seville. Now, I will tell you, I know you were saying that it probably doesn't get as much play, Seville, for all the bands I play in. Seville is the #1 band I am asked about when people come up to me.
Wow.
If I had to take a poll,
yeah,
if I had to take a poll, almost by far, the leader of that poll will be Seville for bands that people at, and it absolutely surprises me. Not because I love the band's great. We had 2 incarnations of the band. Mike left the band, and then we filled in. His seat was filled by Chris King, which he actually was Mike was the one who suggested Chris King, who was in Machete and Against All Authority, and he's just a phenomenal drummer, phenomenal guy too. So then we made the second EP, which was a split with Duval, which was basically the Smoking Popes with a different bass player during their hiatus from being the Smoking Popes. So that was really fun, and that was a blast. The thing is that Seville came to close too early. We basically broke up out on tour, and I'll say part of that was a couple of us weren't getting along. And I was pretty burnt from touring. I was doing every Dashboard, and then I was also, as soon as Dashboard was off for a week, I was doing shows with Seville. There were times where Dashboard's bus would drop me off in DC. The boys would meet me in DC, and then we'd go play shows for a couple of weeks, and then I'd have to get home to rehearse for Dashboard, and stuff. So I thought I could keep that pace up. I obviously couldn't. And when we were having turmoil in the band, when we just weren't getting along, which happens on tour all the time, but I wasn't I think I was just too burnt to deal with it in the same way. So we basically called it quits. And we shouldn't have. We probably should have just finished off the tour, taken a break. Could have made a lot more music. Probably should have made a lot more music. We should have done it that way. Hindsight's 2020. I've left or called it quits on bands at always the wrong time. I left Dashboard to go play, to go do a full 2-month tour with Seville, that Dashboard was supposed to have off, and I was excited, so I booked we had a booking agent. Flower Booking used to book Seville, and they booked us 2 months, and it was awesome. And and so I left Dashboard, and then like a month into the tour, we broke up and drove home, which was terrible for all reasons, for business reasons, for friendship reasons, for financial career. Do not come to me for musical financial career advice. I am not that guy. I definitely play it because I love it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like making money playing music, but I'm just, you know, I like playing things. So if something's got to give for another thing, then I do it. But you know, it was one of the hardest decisions. People ask me about it all the time. You know, and it just happened to be that, you know, we were supposed to be off for the summer, and I didn't know Weezer was going to call and ask Dashboard to go out on tour for the summer, you know, and I had to choose between going out and opening for Weezer or going out with my band Seville, and I chose Seville. And then Seville ended up breaking up, and you know, so you know, hindsight being what it is, yeah, I would probably not make that same choice, but you know, who knows? Maybe I would, you know, at that age and doing that. But you know, Dashboard's bass spot has been in the brilliant hands of Scott Shanebeck ever since, and he's one of my favorite people on the planet, and I could not be happier that Chris has that kind of person that he looks to his left now and sees every day. So it worked out best for you know, for Dashboard. You know, Dashboard's, that train didn't stop, you know, but you know, I probably could have done that and done Seville, you know, rebooked the tour and stuff. You know, it was just difficult decisions that, you know, business decisions that I wasn't really either good at, or like, man, how do you get through these, you know, decisions? And it probably could have been made better. And then the fact that Seville broke up right afterwards is a bummer. But then, you know, I went on to play with, you know, the Enablers and, you know, Legends of Rodeo and John Ralston record, you know, all the records that I've recorded since, you know, I'm so proud of, and the bands that I play with, you know, that Enablers record is maybe that first EP, Sweet Fuck All, is maybe one of my favorite things I've ever recorded. Rob Coe's a monster songwriter. I'm so excited I get to go up to Gainesville and rehearse this coming week with those guys, and Andre's the drummer in the Enablers now, so we checked off another band that we're in together. But
also another former guest, Todd Rockhill.
Yeah.
So what's it like working with Todd?
Todd's like the gentle giant, man. He's so damn good too. You know, like back in the day when Todd was playing bass in Discount, you know, that was exciting because Discount was you know, one of those Florida bands that everybody was all about, and enjoyed that. And then the first Enablers tour we did in the UK, we did with Black Cougar Shock Unit, which he was a guitar player for, and that's how I met Todd. That's how I got to know Todd better. The first night we were in London, you know, I didn't know these guys that well, and we were sharing gear and sharing a van together and stuff like that. So they could party. I mean, like, that band could party hard. Their singer was straight edge, but everybody else was off their rockers, drinkers. And so I remember at the end of the show getting to know Todd because he was practically in the gutter in the street behind the bar as I was helping after we loaded the van, like lifting him into like the van. And, you know, Todd's a big boy. And, but we had a great time. And then, you know, later on, him becoming the guitar player in the Enablers for our next, you know, couple tours was just, was phenomenal getting to know him. You know, you get to know people very well, and, you know, and you should enjoy them, you know, because usually you're like-minded. You want to go on tour, you want to play music, you know, have a great time. And riding up front, driving when he's in shotgun or vice versa, it was just a blast with him. And the Lightworkers just played up in Gainesville with his band Thunderclap, who are phenomenal and like, dude, they are just monsters. And so we just played a show with them in the backyard not so long ago, just like a month or two ago. So that was really fun, and just to get to hang out with him. And we were watching hockey and stuff, and having some beers, reminiscing. We were just like, when's Rob gonna get the Enablers back? When are we gonna get back in a room or do something? And so that's happening. So pretty excited about that. Actually, I'm super excited about that. And that mixed with the Lightworkers playing shows in Gainesville and getting a record out is just like I'm beaming about music right now. So it's really fun to be able to do that. And shoot, you and I were supposed to get when we were getting on a call, and I was late because I was in here with headphones on, just practicing Enabler songs and Lightworker songs. And you texted me, and you're like, dude, I'm on the Zoom. It's like, oh shit, sorry, man.
You get in the zone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Enablers show so far? I know you're still going, obviously, coming back, and so to speak. But thinking about some of the Enabler shows, is there one that stands out to you as one of your personal favorites?
Yeah, the one that stands out to me, we played in Memphis. We were on tour with Drag the River, and we were playing the show in Memphis, and Ben from Lucero was, I believe, I don't know whether he was on the show or whether he just showed up because Drag and Lucero had been out together before, but he played solo, and it seemed like, and so we played before him because he was, so he was probably on the show then. So when he started playing solo, it's like all of a sudden, Brian showed up, the guitar player. He showed up, plugged in. So now they were a duo. And then it was like, then the drummer showed up, started setting up right behind him as they're playing a set. And then they were a trio. And then John showed up with a bit, and started playing. And all of a sudden it was Lucero playing, and that was really phenomenal because I had not been that into Lucero yet. Like I think I'd heard him in passing, but I had never, and liked it, but then forgot to go, get a record or something like that. So that was cool because Chad from Drag the River was sitting next to me. He's like, man, you got to hear this guy sing a song. He can sing a sad song, and it was really great to witness that. And then we stayed with them, and they lived in this giant flat above a hardware store that they had built out like rooms, but it was the size of a dive bar, right? And they might have had a pool table in there or something like that. I remember it had the showers were kind of like gym showers, like that. And if I'm not mistaken, and if they weren't lying to me, it was Elvis's old dojo is where they lived. Elvis's old dojo was above this hardware store, and they rented it out, and they had like a living room, and they had it was where they practiced and stuff like that. And that's where we stayed. And like I remember I think I slept on a couch or something like that, but or maybe even on the floor, but we stayed with them, and it was just kind of one of those unique experiences, and that was their town. Memphis is their town. So to watch them kind of add one person as they were going through the set, because I think Ben, maybe it was Lucero that was booked, and everybody was like, oh, I can't make it because of this, or I can be late, or something like that. But that was a good time, and I'll tell you what, it was a good party. It was a good show. We enjoyed. We toured a couple times with Drag the River, who I love as a band, and got to do a lot of fun shows. So, but that one, just because of that, probably stands out for Enablers.
Would you say the Enablers are one of your favorite bands to play out with and tour?
Yeah, I'll say that. We mainly because I think everybody, like the band as a whole, like playing that music is so, like, people respond to it extremely well. So that's always been fun. Whenever I've taken the stage with Rob Coe, whether it's Fay Wray or Enablers, people respond. And it's whether, we're, and we've done, some touring, with Fay Wray, a lot more with Enablers, and stuff. people just really respond. I think it's Rob's got that great songwriting style, and he's got a super voice. And I think people relate to the lyrics. They relate to how the songs are structured and sound, and they're delivered. They're kind of that rock and roll. This is high praise, but like that Replacements kind of feel. And the Replacements are one of my favorite bands. So but I think it's got all of that. So I think people respond to it well. So it's really fun for me to play on stage because when you get an audience reaction, that's even that's even above what you're enjoying just being with your guys making sounds. It's like when it comes back at you and you can see we all want to be adored. You know what I mean? It's like, so if you get a little bit of that adoration, you're psyched. But Rob's an amazing person. He is quirky. He's so fun. He loves to laugh. He thinks about things differently, which can either blow your mind or make you just die laughing. But I miss him. I'm super excited. I'm gonna go hang out with him this week. So yeah, it was one of those bands that I love playing in front of people that have even never seen us before. I think even with the Vacant Andys early on, like Chris and I always wanted to see if our music would play in front of not our friends. Like we loved it in front of our friends, and whether they liked it or not, they were appreciative or they were nice about it. I want to go play in front of some strangers and see how they react to it. Let's go see if these songs hold up for people that don't know us well. So Enablers pull that off very well.
Out of all the songs you've had a chance to play on, is there one in particular that just is a personal favorite? Like you enjoy to play that song live, or maybe it just has a connection with you that's important?
Wow. Man, I mean, the biggest one that changed, kind of the whole musical landscape for me, it was definitely Screaming Infidelities. That changed it. I got to play that with the band when Chris in Chicago, he was doing 3 nights in Chicago right before COVID. And my wife and I flew up there and he asked me if I wanted to play Screamin', in Chicago, House of Blues. So, Scott was nice enough to let me, borrow the band for that song. So I got to play that. So that'll always be a special song just because, the video got the, it's not just because it's an awarded type song. It's because it really did change the level of like what we were doing, and I got to see behind the curtain a little bit more than being in a local band. I got to see a little bit more of the big machine, how that works. And, a lot of it's fun and a lot of it's, a lot of business. So that one, but, man, there's a song I've recorded with John Ralston. There's some unreleased John Ralston songs that were rejected by our record company when we gave them Before Sorry Vampire. That may be some of my best playing at all. That I've never seen the light of day, and so there's a few of those songs that I'm bummed I've never been out there. But I would love to do that. I love playing John Ralston's record, Shadows of the Summertime, is one of my favorite records. I only got to record one of the songs, but I get to play it live whenever he wants to do that. And for a while there, we were playing it live for a while. And those bass parts are really fun. And they mean a lot, and I have to sing a lot. I'm going to say Screamin' Infidelities is number 1. And I'm probably going to pick, and unreleased stuff, though, we never play live. I'm going to pick for now, I'm going to pick second. Second is going to be War Generation, playing in that band with Brad and with John Bunch and JTL Baby on drums. That I loved playing those bass lines. They were all written by Brad, who's a bass player in other bands, and they were a challenge. And to sing, to match like harmonies with John Bunch for almost every syllable of those songs was a blast. And Tommy Cooper got to sing with him too when he was playing guitar in that. So that was that was a blast. That means a lot. I obviously don't get to do that again, but there's a bunch of them, and each band has their own endearing thing. To me, Apologize by the Enablers is a simple bass part, but it's got to be played right, and that song is just one of Rob's best. I love playing Anchorman songs, Band 12 songs, like playing bass in Band 12 was phenomenal too. There's a lot,
Sure.
there's just so many of them, but there's always the biggest one will always be Screaming Infidelities for me. I know, Dashboards have bigger songs, especially, Vindicated and stuff like that, but Screaming Infidelities always be the biggest one for me. And it's not a standard progression, and stuff. So, but now I love playing, the Lightworkers songs, the ones that I write, I sing, and the ones that Keith writes, he sings. And there's some really great, the first single off of the Lightworkers is so awesome. It's called Sleepwalking, and he wrote it. And I love playing that song because I get to sing, I get to match him. It's kind of like the War Generation thing. I get to match his vocal for most of it. And the bass line's really super fun to play. Chris plays and sings in it on the recording. Chris recorded, but that's one of the few that he sings on too. So that's going to be a blast to play every night when we finally get out and do some stuff. So,
yeah. Can't wait to hear the Lightworkers music in studio form there. You mentioned John Bunch a couple of times and talked about Sensefield and that being a band that you were a fan of and still are to this day. What was it like for you getting a chance to play with John, and how did his untimely death affect you?
Oh man. Wow. I didn't think I was going to get choked up over that. So when Dashboard for our first headlining tour, our booking agent said, "Hey, make a list of bands that you want to open. So we'll just offer, So one of the first bands we picked was Sensefield. We picked Rival Schools. We picked the Smoking Popes, Duval. We picked all these bands, and they all said yes. And since they all said yes, we actually had to have, we had Sensefield out for 2 or 3 weeks, and then, Duval was out for these amount of weeks, and Rivals was out for this section. So we had to section it off, which was amazing. We just couldn't believe everybody said yes to it. So the first night was in Chrome, which is in Perth, I believe Perth, Amboy, New Jersey. And we met, Seville was opening this. So it was Seville, then 2 bands, and then Dashboard. And in this particular case, it was Seville, I think Ben Queller, and then Sensefield, and then Dashboard. So Sensefield got up there, and they were, Dashboard had finished our check. So Sensefield was checking, and we got to meet John Bunch, and we just kind of hit it off. They were super excited, and John confided in us that, not many bands or hardly anybody would ever take them out on tour to open. They always took a whole bunch of bands out on tour, but he was like, yeah, but then nobody took us back, like to open up and, do that. So they were super excited that, John was excited. I don't know about the rest of the band, but, it seemed like they were. John was excited that we were taking them out, and, so we hit it off, then, and we stayed in touch. And then, later on, when he became the singer of Further Sings Forever, he was coming into town. And, those guys had wives and, families, and I didn't at the time. So he called me up and be like, "Bones, we going out tonight?" And it's like, I'm at a rehearsal, can you come pick me up? And I was like, yeah. So I go pick him up, and we go get drinks, go throw some darts, go do whatever, and stuff. And, we just became really close. And I think we became closer mainly because I was available and I was still on that touring timeline like he always was. So we'd always just end up bar hopping around and going to see different bands. And, he came and saw me when I played in Where Fear and Weapons Meet, like on a Sunday matinee. He was like, dude, I can't believe these shows are still happening. This is awesome. It was like crazy. And then getting to play with him, when he called me to play in the band, I was like, hell yeah, man, this is awesome. We'd always talked about doing something, but I never knew how like much he was really into doing that, and he did. And he's like, okay, but Brad's going to call you because Brad's got to really kind of audition you. And I hadn't auditioned for a band in eons, usually, not to say that I'm more than capable of auditioning for a band. It's just that bands haven't asked me to audition. They've just been like, okay, yeah, so Brad came over and auditioned me and gave me the job. And I went over to St. Pete and we rehearsed for a whole maybe week or two, and then came back to play our first show, which was in Lake Worth. That day is the day I actually proposed. I proposed to my wife as soon as I got to my now wife, as soon as we got to the condo, because my ring had actually been sent. I had gotten the ring FedEx to me when I was out rehearsing. I'd hoped to propose to her previous to this, but I had issues with the ring. And then, so that first night, I was engaged for 14 hours and then left on tour with John. And so John and I had a great time. We didn't party because I was in trouble. So I was on probation, so I couldn't drink. So John was a little bummed with me that I couldn't drink with him on that tour. I had gotten myself into some too much trouble. But we had a great time playing every night. The band was phenomenal. I wish that it had taken off a little bit more. We stayed in touch. We were talking about doing a second War Generation record. And then my phone blew up the morning after the night he passed. And I had just spoken with him 2 weeks prior to that. And I was on my way. My wife and I were on our way to a brewery to go meet someone for an engagement party or something. And he was calling me, talking to me about War Generation, about getting together with Brad and doing, getting new songs and demos and stuff. And we were excited about it. And the last thing we said to each other was, I love you. I said, I love you a bunch. And he said, I love you, Bones. And those are the last words that we spoke. And yeah, when I found out, I was devastated. Here was this guy who was, John's only a year older than I am. And I just loved his band and the fact that his band opened for ours and we got to play music together and we just shared, we had the South Florida connection through Further Seems Forever, and he was just a really fun person. And John didn't really dig on anybody. You know what I mean? Like John never, like, even if he didn't like something, John wouldn't bag on it. Like I'll throw stones at it all day. Like I'm terrible at that. And I always try to remind myself to be more like Bunch and not dig on anybody's stuff, But he was just so unique, and he was such a great talent. He was still a kid, at heart. Sometimes that was frustrating, other times it was just beauty, in the fact that he just wanted to do this, and he knew he was great at it, and we knew he was great at it. So we had a lot of fun, and he was just a dear person who, as I'm looking at you so I have this really funny photo. This is John was down. This photo's Johnny and I, and John was down to rehearsing with Further Seems Forever, and it was Mother's Day, so he had nothing to do because everybody went to go visit their moms. So I went and picked him up, and we went to my family's Mother's Day celebration, and I have this silly photo from him, which we took some silly photos. There's a couple that have made it through the movie and stuff, but it really affected me because I think John was unhappy that he wasn't out touring, right? He wasn't making money, making music. They had to do other jobs, and we've all done that. But I think John was just, John liked to party. John liked to play. He didn't like to work. I think he did it. He loved his boy, and it was a really bad accident, and I mean, we miss him. I mean, I know I miss him. I hear him here and there, like love when his songs come in. I love hearing his voice and stuff. So I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. I'm just lucky enough to have been able to play in a band with him and get to know him a lot more, and definitely celebrate that because he was just a big, goofy, super talented guy, But yeah, that was. But I had to leave work. When I found out I had to leave work, I was. It's troubling. Obviously, I mean, like it's troubling to me now. So
sure. I appreciate you sharing your memories of not just War Generation, but also your time just knowing John the person behind the curtain, so to speak. And
he's great, man.
Did you get a chance? Okay.
No, go ahead.
Did you get a chance to partake or attend the John Bunch Forever tribute?
Yeah, we did. We did the Philadelphia one. So War Generation got to play the Philadelphia one, and John Owens filled in for John Bunch on it. He did an amazing job. It was fun. We played at the TLA. It was a blast. I flew up there, rehearsed with the boys. Got to see a lot of people that got to tour with him and hear a lot of really dear things, about John, that all of us already knew, but we definitely wanted to hear it. So it was a great celebration. I wish I could have made the California one. I know that one was great too, but yeah, we did. It was a really great show, and it's super celebration of John's life, and I think it raised a lot of money for Jack, his son, and so I'm just to do something like that and be a part of it. It was great. I got a migraine that day before we played, and it finally went away like right before we played, but it was a emotional day, but a lot of super talented, bands and people that were filling in, singing for John, when Sensefield was playing. And it was just fun to see them all experience the songs in a different way and what he meant. And everybody was really up, like John would have been. He'd been like, hey man, he was like, dude, can you believe this? Or, that type of thing, and it was a really great time. And I know Jeremy Weiss, who probably helped put on a lot of that stuff, and was a dear Sensefield, tour managed Sensefield, and I think maybe Reason to Believe before that. He just did such a wonderful job, and whoever was part of that just killed it.
When you're playing a solo show, or just more your material solo wise, do you include any songs from your period with War Generation, or maybe some of the other bands you've been in over the years, and kind of add them into the set?
Yeah, I don't include too many songs from a lot of the bands that if I didn't write the song in the band, then yeah, I don't probably play it. I have played Vindicated before, at the pub, maybe once. Just through I've done Save Yourself by Sensefield. I did that once, and that was a little tough to get through. I did that at Poorhouse. Anchorman, we covered a John Bunch. We covered a Sensefield song because we played a show at the Poorhouse for a reunion that was like right around that time of John's birthday, I believe. So, but no, I don't really play. I have, very rarely. I've played I played Apologize once at a show. I play a John Ralston song every once in a while. Maybe John Ralston's song is probably the one that I play the most. But no, I don't really play too much of the stuff. But then again, when I play out solo, I like playing. Most of the time when I play out solo, I play my own songs. Play a cover here and there just to kind of get people's ears, listening. Um, Playing out solo is not my favorite thing to do. Um, I've I wanted to do it. I will say this: when I didn't have a band, I decided that, man, I'm just going to learn how to play guitar better, and it made me a better singer. Um, Learning how to do that, singing over just playing by yourself, maybe a better singer, maybe a better guitar player too. Learning songs, and stuff like that. Mainly, I was playing my own covers here and there. I'm probably my worst critic about it, because my friends will probably be like, especially Keith, he's always like, dude, that was great. Shut up, it's fine. But yeah, I'm not I can't go out there and just, I have tried this before. Actually, when I got off tour with War Generation, I didn't have a job. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just play covers out, get paid to play covers like some of my friends do. So I borrowed Keith's, he let me borrow his sound system, and I played at a bar and got paid. It was well, I got paid well, but it's a 4.5 to 5 hour gig. You play 3 sets, but you got to set up there and in between intermissions and stuff like that, and it just wasn't. I enjoyed it for them, but I didn't really enjoy like having to learn cover songs every week to like freshen up the set, and so that wore out real quick. I only did it. And then I played at the pub. I played at my local, the Lion and Eagle, where Chris plays, Keith plays, all my songwriter friends have played there. I wrote half my Grey&Orange record at that place with some of those guys. But used to play there, play a couple covers, played my own stuff, and was doing that every other Friday night for a while. And then I realized I wasn't writing any new music. I was more worried about getting a fresh new cover in there that I was going to play for no one listening, and as you're playing the soundtrack to people drinking, on a Friday night, which, is enjoyable and fun, but it just wasn't, it's not how I find joy in music. I find it fun for a little while, and then it wears on me because I'm not being creative in what I like to do. So I had to stop that. And so I haven't really done that. I'll play here and there if somebody asks me to. It takes me a while to practice. Like I was mentioning before, like I don't have stage fright when I go on stage, but that's when I have my bass on, when I have my guitar on and I have to be the guy singing it and stuff. I'm nervous. I get nervous because it's not as natural to me. It's not what I do. I realized a long time ago, 15 to 20 years ago, at least, that I'm best at playing bass for singers, songwriters, or for songwriters, getting their songs to where they want them to be. I'm best at that. I like doing the other things, but I know what I'm best at. And so I tend to concentrate on that these days, and especially with, I'm not going to outright it. I don't write songs for the Enablers. I do write songs for the Lightworkers, so I need to work on that because Keith writes a song like every hour, and I write a song like every year. So I got to try and keep up with that. So yeah, solo wise, very rare. And you know what? Most people don't recognize me for that stuff. It's not like some randos coming in going, "Oh, dude, that's the guy from Dashboard. Hey, play Vindicated, play." Like very rarely. If someone does that, it's my friend trying to take the piss, right? Well, most of the time. So that's the way that goes.
Have you ever played Lax the Love live?
I have played Lax the Love live. Yes, I have. As a matter of fact, Grey&Orange actually rehearsed it for a while. My band, we played it out once in a certain incarnation of that band. And then, yes, I used it was one of the first things that I used to play out live on guitar because I wrote it and I knew how it would go. I haven't done it in a long time because I don't think that I don't think I pulled it off very well because there's 3 very distinct voices singing the different parts and they're not mine. So, one of them's mine, but so for that, and it's all bar chords, and I'm not the strongest guitar player, and that song's, although it's not long, it's a lot longer when I play it acoustic because I don't play it at Jason Letterman breakneck speed. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I have played it out, and it's funny. I should make I should make an acoustic version of that song to where it's like it works out, it plays out better, because that would be a fun one for the repertoire since I wrote it, right? So,
Yeah.
and you were so gracious to put it out. That I'm still kind of boggled that you wanted to put that out, but I love it, man, and I love that the Shakers are on the backside because I've gotten to fill in for some really awesome bands. Like I filled in on bass on tour for Augustana when their bass player got struck by lightning. I filled in for some dates there. I filled in on horn for local band Lever's Key. But the Shakers are the one. When I get the call from the Shakers, like the juices get flowing. I'm like, I get to totally be punk rock as hell, and you know, like I filled in for the Darling Fire just recently on their last little run, and that was a blast. Such a blast. And now they have a rhythm section that just joined and stuff. And that was actually such an enjoyable tour being out with them. It couldn't have been a nicer time. Songs were really hard to learn, but we got them down. I think we performed them well. But yeah, man, Alexa loves I'm gonna have to mark that down in my notes. I'm gonna have to get an acoustic version of that, and the next time, and maybe I'll lay it down, or somebody will film it when I play out live next, and send it to you.
Yeah, I'm sure an acoustic version would turn out really, really well. So,
how did that come around for you? Why did you want to do that?
so I really like that song. I also like the fact that it showcased a lot of people from South Florida, from various bands over the years, and also it was one of those songs that I didn't really catch until when I had Jason Letterman on the podcast, and he was talking about that song, and it just, I don't know, never was on my radar. I never had a chance to hear it. Never knew it even existed. And then when I heard it, I was like, okay, this is a pretty catchy song, and I just really liked it. Really liked it a lot, and just thought it was a fun song. And yeah, so that was one that I just wanted to kind of start with. And
So it was awesome that you wanted to do that. Like I think I had released it digitally on Bandcamp to no
right.
avail. But yeah, I mean, when I moved up to Boston to play with Quit, it was maybe the first song that I wrote when I was up there, and I wrote it on guitar, and I was like, okay, I like this, and worked on it, and I never offered it to Quit or anything because I didn't think I'd finished it yet. And then I happened to be at Andre's house where in Miami, where Addison was staying, and Addison was learning how to record. He was like really trying to figure this out, and for whatever reason, like Letterman was coming over. I think Addison was recording the Stick Shift Lever stuff too. I know they did I know Letterman's vocals were done in my duplex in Fort Lauderdale for like the Stick Shift Lever stuff. And Johnny O and I were just hanging out all the time because we're great friends, and I think Seville we might have been trying to do stuff with Seville at the time, and it was just kind of this thing where like there's another recording from the time period of that with a bunch of other people called the Everbodies, and it's like Jeff London from Fay Wray and Brett from Radon and Addie and me and maybe Johnny O too, and like just a whole bunch of different people jumping in on different instruments playing. And that's what this was kind of like. Man, let's just go ahead. Here's how it goes. And I remember it just being really fun. And of course, you're laughing all the time when you're around Letterman, and stuff. So the lead into that song, where he's asking for the, don't forget the lime, and give me a Perrier. Like it's just like that sets the mood for things like that. And then he played that song at like Mach 5, and which the song was never that fast, but John loved it and Letterman loved it. And I was like, all right, we'll just keep it this way. And then getting Addie's vocals, getting Addison from Quit to sing the choruses on that, and sing those things, sing the verses and stuff, which is so cool.
Yeah, I think that's what it was for me too. It kind of had this nostalgia feeling of these people who were in these bands that you grew up with, and then here's this one song, this one off song that most people, and I'm going to say it again because I mean, I don't know. It wasn't something that I would see people, bring up or talk about, or I don't even where I would even hear something like that. But either way, but like this song that maybe a lot of people don't know, like me, exists, but it's people that you'll recognize if you grew up in South Florida and knew some of these other bands.
Yeah.
And it's just one-off song, and it's a pretty good song. And I do like the tempo, which I really want to hear an acoustic version now that you brought that up. But either way, it was just this one-off song, and there are no others. Like that was the only one that you all recorded, right?
Yeah, that's it. That was it. And really we just did it as a test for Addison, like working on like recording bands and stuff like that. He was just trying to figure out how to record, and it was like, what better way to do it than have a song and a band where you're locking into different parts, and stuff like that, and writing it right there, like those guys nobody had heard that song except for me. Addison maybe had heard me strumming it because we lived together in Boston for a while, but other than that, yeah. And it came out extremely well. I just didn't have anything to do with it, like I was like, when we recorded it, I was like, I'm off doing other things. I don't really know, like I'm not going to shop a single, or I wasn't going to print up a 7-inch, at that time. And I was just like, just sitting in the back pocket. And we all loved it. And John and Letterman, man, he used to bust my balls. They're like, when we putting it out? Letterman was always busting my nuts about every time I saw him, like whether it was on tour or we ran into each other at a show. He was like, dude, when we're releasing a song, I was like, I don't know, like if I had given it to him, he probably could have had it released, 15, 20 years ago. But yeah, that was a super fun one. And then, getting to do something like that, and, with Shakers on the flip side too and stuff. And, that kind of goes back to, whoever's listening to this, if you're fans of Quid or Fay Wray or Anchorman or Vacant Andys or all the bands that Letterman's played in, AAA and stuff like that, like if you might need this for your collection, man. You might have to have this for your collection if you're going to get all the lineage there,
right?
This is one to have. And on that pink vinyl, what,
it is pretty sweet. Yes. Oh, there it is. Yes.
Brad's ass.
Yeah. Quite the cover.
I actually bought one from you to send, and had it sent to my dad. My dad was like, if you're going to make me famous, he was like, at least get me one. And I was like, all right, I'll have it sent to your house, Pops.
What did he think about the cover being printed like that?
I think he loved it because he probably gets to show it off. My dad's pretty like I said, my dad's pretty risque and everything like that. So, he's a little bit of a hellraiser. So I'm sure, I know he enjoys it. He probably rolled his eyes that he's like, that's the photo that, of me. But he was having a good time. I'm sure he was probably about 8 scotches in when that happened at the pool. And but I mean, obviously he's in his underwear, so he obviously didn't come prepared for the pool.
Right.
I mean, it's a good, you know what, everyone, you should be thanking me that at least it's from the back, it's not from the front. All right. So, and the tighty whiteys. Come on.
And I'm sure little did he know that that would one day become a cover of a 7-inch record.
Exactly. Some blurry photo from some camera in 1980, freaking probably 3 or 4 or something like that.
Good stuff. And going real quick back to the idea of and I remember Jason bringing that up too, like wanting to have more music from that particular group of people. Is there any possibility that could ever happen where you all get together and maybe record another song?
Oh, for sure. We totally do it. I mean, no one's ever like, you're the first person to ever even suggest it. Like, even Letterman hasn't suggested that to us. And he has our numbers. All he would have to say is be like, like, hey, who's writing the next BBOL song? Like, who's got a song that we can just, because you can do it all remote now, right? Like we don't have to be in the same place. Like Johnny O's in Brooklyn, Addie's in Detroit, you know, Jason's in Jacksonville, and I'm here. But we could record it tomorrow. If somebody has a song, like we could just get it down and do that. But yeah, we could totally do it. I mean, we could totally do a follow-up for it, you know. I'm sure between Addison and I, and maybe so even Johnny O, we have a song that we've never, I know for a fact for me, and I know for a fact for Addison, and I don't even know what Addison's got in the tank, but I guarantee you he's got plenty of songs that he hasn't recorded. Yeah, we could probably just send a demo to each other and bang one out. That it'd probably be really fun, and then and do it, you know, do another. I know it would be fun. Don't get me wrong, I know it would be fun. It would just be that no one's really thrown out that idea, you know.
Yeah.
It's so easy these days, you know.
It is. And you know, the first song, Lacks of Love, big fan of that, obviously, and would love to hear what else you all put together, and what fresh intro Jason would come out with for the next song.
No. Yeah, that's exactly, you know what? He should probably just do like the next single will just be him riffing, right? You just secretly record him at a table at the whatever brewery he goes to. Just have somebody record him for, you know, and like it'll be a stand-up special, you know.
What was it like playing with him and Where Fear and Weapons Meet? Because that you all put out 1 7-inch as together, right? Control, when you were playing with them, I think. I don't know if you put out anything else when you were with that band, but
they had put out stuff. I never recorded for them though. Like Wiley recorded the bass part, I think, for whatever was released when I was with them.
Gotcha.
But I didn't record with them. I just played live with them. It was awesome. It was awesome because they were so fun to be around, but they were so pro. Do you know what I mean? Like we you know, the shows were always well attended because, you know, the Weapon always pulled people in, and we always played really, you know, interesting. They always seemed to be interesting shows. You know, like one of the shows we did at Churchill's, like we played. It was like one of those tribute type things. Like we played all Cro-Mags songs. We were the Cro-Mags for that. You know, we played that, and was like John Joseph was there, happened to be in town, you know, and stuff like that. And like he ended up singing a song with us. I don't know whether that was in Hialeah or in Miami or what, you know. Like they were really pro. They were so fun. I mean, Jason's really fun to be around. He was fun. We have a good time hanging out, you know. He's just naturally funny, and he's got that, you know, X-rated humor. So that went well. You know, I really enjoyed my time there. We got paid extremely well. When I played in that band got paid extremely well. And you know, Chip and Wiley and Alex, they were great to be around. Most of the kids were great. Most of the fans, you know, a lot of them at the time, they hated that the guy from Dashboard was playing in The Weapon. That was a weird time for me because, like, you know, I would even get like, I remember at one show we played, Coral Springs, like one of the guys came up and spit on me while I was on stage because I was in Dashboard. You know, it's just like the most ridiculous shit, you know. And I'll tell you, 99.9% of hardcore kids aren't like that. You know, they're just not. They're, you know, the Vacant Andys, we used to play in hardcore shows all the time. You know, nobody gave a shit. You know, it was just that's kind of how we came up with whatever bands were playing at that time. But so there was very little that went wrong. It was playing in a Weapon was really enjoyable. It just, you know, went that everybody was doing their, you know, their day jobs, and families got bigger and stuff like that. But yeah, hanging out with Jason for that stuff was just, you know, as you could imagine, was hilarious. You know, and you know, he's a phenomenal drummer, and you know, the band was always tight. The band was always there. You know, Alex is a great frontman, and you know, he really knows how to work that crowd in a frenzy, and you know, the give and take vocals, you know, at different times, and he controls that stage. And you know, Wiley and Chip were always just like, you know, they were there. It was fun. It was really fun to do. I was surprised they asked me to do it because I'm not known as being, playing bass in, hardcore bands and stuff. But I was glad that they asked me, and it was a lot of fun to do for quite a while.
And you being someone that you mentioned way earlier in our conversation, where you could lose it and get really
Yeah.
How did you handle the person who was, or the other people that may have been those outliers that were saying stuff to you? Like, how did you react to that?
Well, for that particular instance, we were on a bigger stage. Like I couldn't get to the person. I couldn't see who it was. I just knew, I'd known that I got spit on. So I couldn't single out the person. But I did turn around and tell Jason, and he grabbed the mic and was like, "Any of you motherfuckers, he was like, why don't you come up here and try that shit with me? Like I didn't need anybody to protect me. I was just telling him, I was like, these fucking people, like what do they care of who I played with, but it happened again, at a different show for a different thing. And it was right after this one I got really mad at because it was right after my recall today, I'm sorry, is pretty off. Who's the singer-songwriter from Elliott Smith? Sorry. So Elliott Smith had just passed away, and we were playing a show. I think it was Hialeah, and the kids jump up on stage and everything. They're going crazy, and this one kid jumped up on stage, and it was like, I think it was in between songs, or it was during on a break where I wasn't necessarily playing, and he was like, Elliott Smith died. And it was like, we got one more to go. Chris Caraba. And then I kicked that kid off stage. Like that was one, I was just like, there's no reason for that. Like, first off, why are you celebrating that someone died anyway? You're like, if you didn't buy his records, who cares? Like, why is it bothering you that much? And the fact that they were, even mentioning Chris and something like that, like that definitely made me violent, and but of course, people like that, like I kicked him off stage, and of course, he was nowhere to be found when after I yelled, I was like, hey, come meet me when we're done playing, and stuff. And of course, nobody wants to come do that afterwards, but and it wasn't even beer muscles because it was like a straight edge show, you know what I mean? But just there's not too much hate when it comes to playing in shows, and stuff like that. But I think we all experience a little bit of it. That one hit me hard. Just there's just a call for it. But whatever. People are trying to get a rise out of whether they're trying to get a rise out of me, or they hate the fact that I'm playing in maybe their favorite band, and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, they asked me. It's not like I didn't get drafted into it, like, I don't know. Maybe he was a bass player and he was unhappy that he didn't get the call. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
It's also strange too, because, down there, at least especially in that time period, like everyone played in all these other bands and not every band sounded the same. And it was a lot of sharing of members, and not just in South Florida, but all over in various scenes in Orlando and Tampa and Gainesville. A lot of bands would share members, and no matter what the genre was, like I never heard of someone getting that upset. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and for someone to be that joyous over Elliott Smith's death was just like, I'm not a huge Elliott Smith fan. I know he's great. I just, I'm definitely, I'm not the biggest Elliott Smith fan for the reason that I'm just not involved in it as much, right? But I know he's talented, and stuff like that. I saw Elliott Smith one time at the Roost out in LA, and like this girl had to take him out of the bathroom because he was passed out and stuff. That was like the only time I've ever met Elliott Smith. And but I know he had his demons, but like, dude, I don't know. For me, having seen death at a young age and stuff like that, like it's just not, when talent goes wasted like that for whatever reason, or we lose some of our greatest talents, even if they're aged out, right? Like they just, they're dying of old age or whatnot, it's heartbreaking, it's like, oh man, we're just not going to have that kind of art in the world anymore. And you know what? We want more of that art in the world. We definitely
Sure.
need less of the so and so is next to die. We'll celebrate that death. You know, we need definitely less of that. But you know, like it's whether you like somebody or not. Their art in the world definitely made some people happy. You know, if it didn't make you happy, it also didn't. It didn't offend you. Probably, pretty sure Elliott Smith didn't offend anyone. And I'm almost positive Chris hasn't offended anybody by a song, unless you lost your girl to like, to somebody
Hmm.
else who liked Dashboard or something like that. I don't know. Maybe you're upset about that, but you know, we've all, it's hard to justify. And it is weird because that's not the only band I've played in down here. I mean, we've rattled off, half of the 30 bands that I've played in, and stuff. And I'm pretty sure there's maybe one that you're okay listening to. Like you just be happy about that one.
Right. As we kind of round things out, Dan, first of all, it's
Yeah.
been great getting a chance to chat with you
Yeah,
and
man.
kind of take a trip down memory lane, but also capture some stuff that you've been doing recently as well. Out of all the instruments in the room with you, any of those make an appearance at the MTV Unplugged?
No, because I had to play the big acoustic ones, and those were just they were lended to me by Taylor made. So, but I had to give those back. Well, I had the chance to purchase them, but they were super, super expensive.
Mm.
And I almost thought about buying one of them, but I was like, am I going to really use this
I
again?
think they
So,
would. I think they would have given you one.
I would have hoped, but you know what? I have found that most of the things that I want, like endorsement wise, most of the things that I want, nobody wants to endorse me for. So, like, if you ever see me play out live, like my gear, except for my guitars, but my gear has all the logos taped out. That I'm like, Galen Krugen, like GK is what I was playing. JK and Eden bass heads, both of those heads. Like I played G&L guitars at that time or basses. I was playing through Mesa Boogie cabinets, but I played DR strings. Nobody wanted to endorse me. So I just took their name off all my stuff. And I'm like, well, if you're not gonna pay me for it, I'm not giving you a free advertisement. So I've I've just done that ever since. But I'm not uh I had an endorsement, like there was nice people that endorsed like strings for me when I was in Dashboard, but I didn't like them as much. So I just bought my own. It's weird that people give you things, they give you clothing, they give you food, they give you instruments and all that stuff. But once you made it and you can actually afford it, when you're a broke ass band trying to make it, you have to buy all your stuff and nobody gives you anything. So
Right.
but that's okay. Like I'm not in it for the advertising anyway. I rarely wear a t-shirt that has, I love bands and stuff, but I rarely wear a t-shirt that has anything on it, logos and stuff like that. um yeah, it's just I'm not a walking ad, and I definitely not when I'm playing either. So, you know, um, everybody knows that bass that I play is a Fender P bass. So there's no sense in hiding that. But for the rest of it, hey, you can either guess or go look it up yourself, but I'm not doing the work for you.
What's been your favorite place to play a show in Florida?
In Florida. Ooh. Um, First place that comes to mind is the Poorhouse. You know, it's always been one of those places that was not always the best sound, but we usually bring like monitors or bring extra stuff that we want to make it sound better. But I think because I've played in so many bands there, that it's usually my first place to go to. It's again, it's not the best sounding room, but it is where I met most of it's where I spent so much time with the extended music family. So it's got a really special place in my heart for a lot of those older bands that I played in. And the Lightworkers, we just played there at the end of last year too. So you know, it's I'm gonna say that's my favorite. I mean, I love playing a lot. You know, there's some other venues that are just brilliant sounding venues. There's some places that we've played, you know, where it's just been, um, so well attended. You know, played some really amazing Churchill shows, especially with Fay Wray and Quit. You know, that were so packed that you know that it's just hard to not enjoy that type of thing. You know,
Yeah.
so you know, just some of those local legend type of places down here. You know, they're just they were fun. They were steeped in history. I was happy that we got to participate in some of that. You know, Cheers was too short lived, but Cheers was, I mean, that stage, man, I might have to. Cheers was just a brilliant place to play too. You know, Cheers and Churchill's, but the Poorhouse is still a place that's open, still going right now. And Jay is he's one of the best. Johnny O used to bartend there, so we were always hanging out. You know, it's just, you know, ever since it turned from the Nocturnal Cafe to Poorhouse, it was just like one of those destinations. And you know what? Johnny Bunch and I had a whole bunch of great times ending up at the Poorhouse. And my wife, I think, saw me play for the first time or maybe the second time at the Poorhouse. So it's just a lot, man. You know, like Jay, there's not like places down here anymore that you're allowed to play original music at. You know, that you get to curate your own show and play original music at. So it's you know, there's one in Boca, Prosperity Brewers, that does it. You know, the Lion and Eagle lets us play more solo, you know, not band wise and stuff. So they're few and far between, but Jay's been keeping that alive for a long time, and it's good to see. Like, I should get out more. This is bad on me, but you know, a lot of the up and coming bands, you know, like they seem to be pulling in great crowds and they seem to sound great. And I'm like, shit, man, I missed it, you know. And the only reason I probably missed it is because the Poorhouse does start shows super late, you know, which can be a pain in the ass when you're older. But yeah, Poorhouse, best answer. That's the longest answer, but well, maybe not the longest, dude. We've been going. I'm almost at Damien Boyle territory.
Oh, yeah, I don't have the exact time here, but yeah, you're getting close, I think.
I almost want to look it up so I can see.
Out of all the Florida bands over the years, what is the one that you may have just taken for granted, you didn't get a chance to really see, or maybe a Florida band that was before your time that you wish you would have had a chance to see live? Any one or two bands in particular come to mind?
Yeah. So I'm gonna say the ones that I didn't get to see. I was right on the edge, and I should have been able to see these bands, but the reactions are I would have wanted to see. In Gainesville, I would have wanted to see Spoke, who kind of started it all back then. I never saw Roach Motel. I would have loved to see Roach Motel. You know, that would have been fun. But yeah, I'm gonna say number one would be the Reactions. Probably would be the number one band I would probably have wanted to see, and I never saw them. And I've gotten to play shows with Joey Maya, but when I do that record got me high, did a show at Churchill's, and Joey was the drummer. It was awesome. So got to play, you know, some punk rock songs with him. But yeah, the Reactions. I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna go with that answer.
Okay, great. You mentioned that record got me high, and I have to mention Rob Alba. Rob's been a guest and a great supporter of the podcast over the years. And you did his podcast, I think, once or twice already?
3 times now.
Oh,
yeah, just
3 time.
I know, I'm a 3-timer. Yeah, the last one I just did was this band that I love from New Jersey called Shirk Circus. But yeah, I did all the Lemonheads and then Shirk Circus. So yeah, it was fun. I love getting together with Rob. I mean, he's fun to talk to. You know, we've become better friends over the last 5 to 6 years, maybe. We were always just kind of in the same places, maybe talk to each other here and there. But over the 5, 6, years, it's been fun because we've gotten to play shows together acoustically, got to play in a band, do the podcast, hang out and stuff like that. And I'm always a huge supporter of the Dan Hosker, music continuum. So I've gotten to play that for the last many years, with different bands and stuff like that. So, be it the Honest Liars and the Lightworkers just play the last one, or playing, solo. So that's been great. It's fun, Rob. I love Rob's take on stuff. He's a curmudgeon when it comes to certain things, but he's always got an opinion. He likes to laugh, but he's also been around a lot of those bands, and stuff that, if I was just maybe a year or two older, I would have seen a lot more of those bands. And, to be perfectly honest, had I not grown up in Boca, I'd probably, if I'd grown up in Deerfield or Pompano, I probably would have seen a few more of those bands too. But yeah, he's a good friend still, yeah, I just love, I love doing his podcast. I love listening to yours. So, I like, he's his own archive of music history, just like you have the sound archive, and stuff, on, you can listen to your podcast, and you could call Rob or text Rob and ask him something, or if he's out for a beer, and he can get on that line, and stuff. So it's good to have, because like I said before, I enjoy history and I love music history. So anytime I can get a little bit more of that, thankfully I don't collect stuff like that, because I'd be broke as hell if listening to you and Rob. I'd like have to search out for these 7 inches that cost like $300 or whatever, like the Eat or something like that. Like trying to find one of their records these days would be costing an arm.
Jeff Hodap has copies of the Eat records in a safety deposit box, he said.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna have to get invited to his house. Right? I think he just lives in Deerfield, right down the street from me.
Yeah.
I see him smoke Page every once in a while, and Boca, we're at the same restaurants or something like that. But yeah, exactly. He's got some of those records. You're just like, oh shit,
So here's a question for you, because I'm sure it's only a matter of time before you make a 4th appearance on Rob's podcast. This may not be the choice that you have to make, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. If you had to do, as your 4th time on there, a Florida record, what Florida record would you choose?
Ooh. I'm gonna, off the top of my head, I'm going Quit Earlier Thoughts. I mean, you can't beat Miami's version of the Doughboys. I mean, it's just yeah, I'm gonna go with that one. That's the, that would be the Florida record that pops into my head the most, and shit, somebody may have already done it on his podcast. I'd have to go back in the archives. I
don't think so, but honestly, I don't know if there's been a lot of Florida bands that have just ironically have been on his podcast. So yeah.
I think everybody's a little, like, most of the people are from Florida, so when you're picking things, it's a little, I think everybody's got these records, the greatest of all time, and until they're almost all checked off. But there's been a few lately that have been like, I did Shark Circus, which nobody's heard of, but it's one of my favorite records in the world. So I was a little weary about, I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to do, this record or that record. But I was like, I've already done 2 kind of bigger records. I'm like, let me do something small, or smaller, and get it out there. And there's been some others out there, like I was telling Rob from his podcast, like and yours too, like I'll listen to people talk about things and be like, oh, I got to go find that. I don't go find it digitally, because I'm not a record hunter like that. But I find it digital, and man, there's some really great stuff that I've listened to, but there are some real duds, man. He's done some of the stuff, and I'm like, dude, I cannot get into that record. Like, I downloaded it, and I'm like, oh, maybe it'll sound better when I'm driving in my car, and I'm like, oh my god, just can't do it.
Yeah, I totally know the feeling, and but it's nice though to have like just such an eclectic bunch of music that maybe and people who are really passionate about it, that it may not be your thing, but you can see the passion someone else has in that music, that it almost makes you feel a little compelled to check it out, to see, well, why are they so passionate about that music?
And that's part of it. Like, I didn't get it, most like where I was talking about the poorhouse, right? So all that music scene, you know, all those music people that were there, you know, having beers and they're talking about, oh, I found this new record by XYZ, or, you know, ABC just put out a new single. You know, that's like how you found out about cooler music that maybe was underground, you know, and stuff. And now you have so much, like there's so much mass media that it's kind of hard to follow, especially if you get on the wrong algorithm, right? You know, it's hard to keep up with what's going on that way. But it's cool because you listen to the podcast and somebody will compare, you know, record A to record B, C, D, you know, from another band, you know, or something like that. And you're like, ooh, who are they then? You know, or, oh, I know one of their albums, or I know a song by them, but I don't know that record. So have you done his podcast?
Yes, I did his podcast. I'm only a one-time champion, though. I'm not a three-time champion.
Yeah, but who did you do? Because
I went in a completely different direction, because I don't think I've had. That's not true. I have had someone on the podcast who was in a death metal band in Tallahassee, Alan Rogers and Darth Vader's Church. So I did a death metal record. I did 6 Feet Under's Haunted, their debut album, which was kind of like a super group from Florida, members of Obituary, Cannibal Corpse, that sort of thing. But I thought about it was a tough decision. You know, I could have went in a lot of different directions, but I was thinking of what introduced me to an entire genre at that age was that record. And it happened to be a Florida, which Tampa is like the death metal capital of the world. I don't know if it still is, but it was. So yeah, that's the record that I picked, but it was extremely tough to narrow down just one. But
what's the next record for your episode?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know yet. I don't know what I would pick, but it would be something drastically different than that, and so many different choices. And you know,
are you going for another Florida band since you're?
Yes. I think I have to.
You're staying true.
I have to stay true. Definitely be another Florida record. And as I mentioned to Rob, you know, it's not just punk that I like, or alternative music, soul, hip hop, jazz. I mean, there's so many genres. My next guest, I'm not going to reveal yet who it is, but a lot of people may not be familiar with their music because it is more of that yacht rock kind of vibe. You know, it's more like soft rock and acoustic, and so and also something I'm really excited because it's somewhere in Florida that I don't think gets as much attention. You know, so, and they just got really hit bad by the hurricane. What was that hurricane? Starts in I think Ivan, is that what it is, or the one that just came through that annihilated Southwest Florida? Yeah, I mean, can't remember all the names sometimes, but yeah, so all types of music from the state. And that's one of the nice things I think too when you do a podcast like this is that, you know, I'm a fan first, and then everything else I feel like comes secondary. But some of the different types of music that has come out of Florida is just, you know, there's so much great stuff that people may not be aware of. And I think when you start to shine a light on some of those bands or artists, musicians, what have you, it hopefully gets people curious. Okay, let me check that out. See what that sounds like. And maybe you're not a big fan of the music, but the story captures you. The person's history, what they've been through, their career. So hopefully that might trigger some interest as well.
Yeah, because I get the only record spine I can read is the Jaco Pastorius one that's over behind your head. So yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, there you go. You get another little representing Florida. So
and that just so happens to be there. So that happens to be like just one of the jazz sections of my collection. So and Jaco, you know, obviously, you know, his career in South Florida and what have you, but being just a global phenomenon as well. When people know you just from one, you know, your first name, and that's it. Like that's how people know you. You know, you've made it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's been great chatting with you, Dan.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time and everything today and taking a trip down memory lane. As we kind of close out the interview, I'm going to kind of turn over to you. Any closing thoughts, remarks you'd like to share to your supporters and people who have been on this journey right there with you? I'll turn it over to you to kind of close things out.
I'm just happy that people have come out to see so many of the bands that I played in. I'm happy that happy to have met you. You put out one of the songs, and in the 7-inch, still playing. Got the Enabler show coming up, Lightworkers, show coming up, and a couple shows actually coming up. So we are playing in Gainesville. There is one benefit down here. We're playing in West Palm on the 13th, and then but yeah, it's I don't know, man. I'm happy about music right now, and playing with my friends, and happy to be talking about music with you, and I just hope people keep coming out and supporting any local acts. I got to be a little bit better about getting out there and seeing some of the bands, and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm excited, and we're all over the socials, whether it's Worker Records, Lightworkers, or Enablers, and anything else that anybody else who calls me to go play. So hopefully I'll see you guys all out there.